Quick greetings. Welcome to another video. Thank you so much for joining us. Uh, you find our videos interesting. Please do share. Um, the idea is it's not just for discussion. Uh, Looking for American Indians who want to begin to carve out their land ownership. We in what Indians are about taking actions, and when I say taking actions, basically this is all done in a civil, what they call civil manner, meaning it's a series of notices that must go to the United States to let them know in no uncertain terms that we're the owners of the land, not them. And this is just something Indians have to know. They have to want this. You can't sit back and think that a republic is the same thing as you having your birthright. First of all, there's a lot of complaining about immigrants. Well, you can complain till the cows come home. In fact, they call you the cows, and they have no intention of you coming home. Okay, you're the cattle in this system. Cattle slavery. However, was thinking the other day, I wonder whose decision it was that cow milk would be like the number one milk in America. Who made that decision? And is it a way of solidifying the fact that it's the land of cattle? But anyway, the videos are not just us doing a lot of talking, although, Peru talks a lot and does a lot of talking all around the world with it. Um, we're actually taking taking legal action, what they would call legal actions. And again, that means we're writing public officials, we're writing the government. I have also done my share of sending notice. So this channel, let us be clear, we're not just talking. We are looking to make the changes that only an American Indian can make. We mean business. Again, we are peaceful Indians, but you can be peaceful and have someone, shall we say, crap all over you in an act of an assault. The way Glenn Fern, a state national, I love when he called it, uh, he's been assaulted by the Commerce Clause. Oh, that's exactly what Indians are being, more than he is being. They took their little Commerce Clause to mean that they have plenary authority. This is a word that's in their legal system, ladies and gentlemen. Plenary, a word they made up. That's not in the Constitution. Okay, so they're assuming not just commercial authority over American Indians' resources, they're assuming guardianship over American Indians. Okay, guardianship, meaning what? You don't have a say. Your guardian speaks for you while your guardian steals from you. This is not for those who will want to sit back and watch television, ladies and gentlemen. Now, again, Raul does his share of watching TV, but he also has taken action. It's just a matter of documentation, ladies and gentlemen. You are the authority when you write. That's, as they used to say in the hood, that word is born, baby. That is the word of law when an Indian speaks. But you must know you must know your position. You must be willing to not need validation from a corporation that made itself your guardian. You don't get validation from that kind of a jankiness, that kind of unfounded, unlawful action, legalized land theft. Okay. And no, it's not operating in private either. No, that's not having your birthright. We talk about that all the time. Acting in private, any foreigner can do that. So, no, that's not meeting the mark, ladies and gentlemen. It is not. It's you taking part in your own demise and the fraud. Okay. It's defrauding those who are landlords that, in their system, they call it landlord. We wouldn't call it that, but if it was in their system, it would be someone taking the role on the down low, but actually they're doing it quite, quite, you know, basically they're doing it through like a legalized fraud. So we see what's happening, but when we go to speak against it, we're given the reasons why they can steal from us. That's what it adds up to. So then we think, oh, okay, so that must be the way it was supposed to go. I guess this is English law after all, and it's the only law in the world. So I guess I just got tough luck. I was born into tough luck forever and ever to their God. Amen. Oh well. Oh, okay. Come on, little moo moo. Let's get ready for school so you could get indoctrinated, and then your children become slaves like I allowed you to become a slave. Yeah, and it just becomes a generation, what they call a generational curse. But that's okay. Oh well, this is all we got. This is what we got to deal with. Deal with? Well, seems to me you're not dealing with it. Come on, somebody talk about it. You're waiting for some republic? Oh, you think those people I keep talking about a republic got your back? Do some learning. Find out if there was a republic before you got colonized, and you will find that there was none. We're not for the games, ladies and gentlemen. How how long will you rely on somebody doing it for you because they sound like they know shit? Yeah, they know how to make you a slave. That's what they're doing. So now this is the part where we have to justify why we use ChatGPT, because apparently now, I think there's a notion in Indian country, which is all of the Americas, that ChatGPT, you don't talk to no machine and stuff. That don't make no sense. Well, it wouldn't make sense if they weren't trying to make this the foundation of their legal system. As I have said before, ladies and gentlemen, I work in the legal field, and I promise you, law firms are using AI. I think ultimately this could be what actually replaces what they call paralegals, because this AI is much sharper than any paralegal. It really is. It can pump out a memorandum in 20 seconds flat. A human person is not going to do it that quickly. So this is what I see. This is not what was told. This is what I see because of the way AI is being used right now. it's only going to get, it's only going to get, depending on how you look at it, worse. Well, so AI has it's um, working in the legal field. Again, I'm not an attorney, but I can tell you it's not just a firm that I work for, which shall be unnamed. It's it's a trend among major corporate law firms, and it is hitting Lexis. I can tell you for sure that Lexis is a it's a what would I call it? I use it all the time. Uh, Lexis is a legal program. It's a search engine where you can look up cases, you can look up statutes. Lexis has always been kind of superior to the competitor, Westlaw. In the beginning, Westlaw was the case master. It had all the cases, and Lexis was still getting cases, but Lexis excelled in what I would call periodicals. They had just about all the publications in the legal field, like the law New York, any law journals, the New York Law Journal, the Wall Street Journal, and so Lexis at one time that was where we would go for legal news, like legal publications, but they were not necessarily case reporters. Like case reporters, that's cases, all cases, like the Federal Reporter, the New York Reporter, New York Supplement, Federal Supplement. There's so those familiar with those books, they know exactly what I'm talking about. So Westlaw was very, very extensive with case law, whereas Lexis at one point was super extensive with, like, we might call them secondary sources, although some, newspapers are said to be primary sources as well. But Lexis had like a lot of the periodical publications, uh, the newspapers. So one was more about state, federal cases, and one was more about the various uh, newspaper periodical sources. So, so Lexis and Westlaw, as of today, I can just as of last week, we had a demonstration from Lexis uh, showing how their new AI platform will function. So when you hear an American Indian who is a little skeptical on the use of ChatGPT or even AI, they probably don't, they're not aware of what's happening in we'd have to say United States legal field. AI is taking over the legal field like a whirlwind. It is just always talked about. It is always, sought to, people are sought to give their ideas of how they think, AI could help the legal field. How could it help you in what you're doing in your day-to-day activities or your duties? They want ideas from, everybody. Like, how can we implement this? Because it's going to be the go-to. So that's why you may have noticed on my channel as of late, It's all about the conversations we had with ChatGPT. Because what it is, ladies and gentlemen, the reason for that, if you want to know why would you talk to an AI robot thing? Because it's going to give me answers that will be found in the legal field. That means it's a very legal conversation you're having when you talk to ChatGPT, even with its mistakes. It's, because they have this little thing that they put on the page. There can be some mistakes. Well, the legal field don't care about that, right? But they're going to leave a little room. They want, you see, they can't have it. I believe, this is me, I don't think they want us to have too much. They don't want it to be completely on point because I think they want to have room to argue us down when we use it. You see what I'm saying? So it's like they can't say that this shit is like 99.9999% accurate, although it would what is that's what a computer does. A computer can take information that exists. That means somebody put it in. So what you gonna put misinformation in a legal a tool that's used in the legal world? Again, ladies and gentlemen, that's so they have a little wiggle room to maybe when they really want to, say for instance, dominate an American Indian, they need that little wiggle so they can come up with anything they need. See, okay, let's look at it through the eyes of the doctrine of discovery. We know for a fact, if you've been watching my videos, we know for a fact that the doctrine of discovery is the actual true foundation of the government system in our land, the United States. The United States would not be here if it wasn't for the doctrine of discovery. This is something that is just there's no way around it. How does that break down? It breaks down to this. Do they have any documentation where an American Indian invited England, France, Spain, Portuguese, Portugal, Germany, any of the countries that took part in our colonization in some way, shape, or form? Where did they get the go ahead to come and build an English, ultimately what would be an England legal system? We are under English laws. You see, it's not American law. Okay, we are clear on that, I hope. So if there was no invitation, if there were no major leaders like Powhatan that said, I am surrendering my chiefdom to England, and here, have at it. I want to go fishing or something. There is no such document, ladies and gentlemen. And if they find one now, it's a lie. It's a lie because they've never produced one before because it doesn't exist. How did the United States get to any part of the Americas? It got its go ahead from the Church of Rome with the doctrine of discovery, point blank, period. This is something you just, if you can't get to that point, don't even bother to be in this because you're going to be swept away on some bullshit that the United States will come up with. They cannot just outright tell us that they are here because of the doctrine of discovery, because they want to make it like, oh, it's willy-nilly. It's just we're here because God wants us here. Well, that's basically what the doctrine of discovery is saying. Okay? So, and what was our point? have to, okay, the point is that that's why ChatGPT will not be able to answer everything. Why? Let's lay it out for you. Please listen. Because with the doctrine of discovery, you can make up shit at a drop of a dime. That's why. So ChatGPT has no idea what the United States will come up with to dominate American Indians, is what we're saying. So there has to be a gray area because the United States, it's just like when it made up the idea of plenary authority. The word plenary authority or the phrase plenary authority is nowhere in the Constitution. So how did the United States come up with that word? They made it up. So ChatGPT wouldn't be able to deal with something that is freshly made. You see what I'm saying? ChatGPT won't be able to keep up with the lies and deceptions that the United States might come up with or might have to come up with to justify why they are dominating American Indians. So that's why I believe ChatGPT, it would be at a disadvantage because right now ChatGPT is full of known, the known uh, things that the doctrine of discovery has produced, like plenary authority. That's just one example. Domestic dependent, that's another thing. That's not the Constitution, but it made it to United States laws because what? The courts made it up. They made up the idea of domestic dependent. They say we're not sovereign, so they'll call us domestic dependent, meaning that we depend on them. Wait a minute. When you say I depend on you, but you're on my land, who am I actually depending on? I'm depending on my own resources. You are stealing from me. You're dependent on me. And you're dependent on me being gone so you can steal forever from me, from my babies, from my generations to come. You intend to feed your generations and starve out mine. You see? So that's where ChatGPT would fail because the United States can come up with anything it needs to using the doctrine of discovery until Indians notify them that we're aware of your fraud. We're aware of your criminal activity. Because the doctrine of discovery that you use so much has been repudiated. It is no longer valid. And they will actually argue, they got ChatGPT. That's one thing they do have it trained to do, is to argue that just because the doctrine of discovery was repudiated don't mean that the United States gotta go. If the doctrine of discovery brought the United States here, it is the only thing that will make it go is the doctrine of discovery and Indians who are not having it. Indians who know now that they don't have to be dominated. Now, some Indians, for some reason, they insist that we had a republic. They are incorrect, ladies and gentlemen. You hear anybody talking about what? Rebuilding the republic. Negro, you wasn't part of that. The NEGRO-PEAN was part of that because he was the one that was breaking away from a king. Not you, American Indian. You got your lanes switched again. And that's another thing. If you're going to enter this ring, you better know your position because you will be all over the fucking field, running around, playing for one side, then playing for your side, then playing for the other side, and playing for your side. It ain't going to work. Know your lane, know your place. If you insist you're an American Indian, act like one. So now American Indians have the daunting task of separating themselves from NEGRO-PEANs. And this is something that the NEGRO-PEAN's worst nightmare is you figuring out that you're not him. Because all he does is stand there, I'm you, you, me, I'm you, me, I'm you, me. You got to slap some sense into that more. The more he will be anything he needs to be to steal from anybody he needs to steal from. Okay, he could be black, just like Michael Jackson video, is black as white. That's a more for you right there. He can be anything. He will be anything needed to have dominion on your land. Okay. And again, let's go do it quickly. It's our due diligence. That's why the Moor loves Caucasians. The Moor is in love with Caucasians. What the Caucasian offers, we say it all the time, ladies and gentlemen, but it's for posterity. What the Moor loves about the Caucasian is that he can claim. I hope you're sitting down. It is rather amazing and mind-boggling. But with a Caucasian, a Moor can actually claim creator rights over Caucasians. Yeah. In the Moor's mind and in his publications, he claims dominion over the Caucasian through breeding rights. In other words, if you breed a new species, like say now there's a special type of cat or a special exotic type of dog that you painstakingly put all the different things needed to create a certain look of a dog. You have the basically the patent on that type of dog. Anybody who buys that dog, they need to you get a cut of that because that's your special Frankensteinian Fluffy. Fluffy the Frankenstein dog. You see, ladies and gentlemen, this is what the Moor spends his time doing, thinking up ways how he can completely override systems, governments, people, by injecting something that he can say makes it uniquely his creation. Truth be told, that is what the Rona was supposed to do. Rona is supposed to make natural men and women no longer natural men and women, so that some sultan or some European NEGRO-PEAN nobility can say, well, they're not really uh, creations of God. Maybe the black man as God, but they're not creations of the most what they would call the Most High God. So they think of ways to disconnect you from your divinity so that it can say, well, you're not divine anymore. So can't I own whatever you have because you're not really natural? I made you, you know, it's true. Mr. Potato Head. See, that's a very important song, ladies and gentlemen. We don't just sing that for fun. It's what the Moor is actually doing. If I made you, I own you. You're not God's anymore. You don't belong to God. In fact, I have become God. That's what the boy is saying in his heart and his soul. God. That's in his book. He says that several times. The black man is God. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it gets a little deeper because turns out that well, this I had a discussion, a deep discussion, and this is where it led. And my mind was blown, and I don't often talk about it, but every now and then you'll hear me touch upon it. That it turns out that that's kind of what men are. Men, all men, no matter what color, black, white, whatever you want to make them a color. We are also, shall we say, a result of genetic mutations. Okay. Uh, some people say it and they don't get ridiculed, and they say it and they prove it and all of that. But there was a time when there was only females. And it's when I play that out, and rationalize that out because when I first heard it, I was floored. What's the word? Floored. And it took me some time to like adjust because I was completely like, well, you mean I'm a Frankenstein project too? Oh shit. But there's still, somewhat of a, I don't know what you call it, a pecking order. If you're the first Frankenstein project, then that means you still get first birthrights. Okay. If you're the first Frankenstein of all other Frankenstein projects. Okay. So yeah, the diva, that's one of the ladies. She has a channel. I just know that she goes by the name the diva. And I'll be honest with you, I feel like I learned a little bit from her. It wasn't the most welcome knowledge, but she certainly legitimized it. She went as far as saying that a man is just a woman inside out. In other words, a man is just basically a woman that was reconstructed, genetically modified, and to be like a woman turned inside out, something to that effect. And I at the time I was, like I said, I just was like, okay, this awakening ain't playing today. So I will take it a step further, ladies and gentlemen. So when I let my mind sit with these things. When people tell you certain things about what they know about their religions and stuff, and I feel like you have to believe them, but then you also have to look and see, does it make sense in the way things play out in the world? And I found that for me, it did make sense. It did make sense. It explains why this thing that we call maturing. Why do boys mature slower than girls? Why? If we're equals and all of that, then why does one mature slower? And this is another thing we just take it for granted. We never think twice about it. It's just the way it is. That's just the way God made it. No. Yeah and no. Yeah, no. uh, yeah. It's just one of those things. The longer I've sat with it, the more convinced I am that it's truth. So now we have both gone on a tangent again, haven't we? Today, we are going to dispel the notion that the original American Indians before colonization ever had a quote unquote republic. Okay? We're just going to uh, hit that. We're going to kick that to the curb. Going to kick if you don't know where you come from, you don't know where you're going. You have to know where you started to get back to where you started. Get right back to where you started from. That was a good song, Maxine Nightingale. It was a good song. Uh, okay, so let's share our screen. We have a couple of things to go through, ladies and gentlemen. Hope it's a time of the day where I should be able to stay. Yeah, but yeah, the diva, ladies and gentlemen. I think she was a former Moor, and she has in her channel. She has basically said you cannot be a Moor and claim this land. Now she still wants a republic, and that's where she still wants a republic, and she still seems to be okay with operating in private. So that's where I realized, okay, it's coming in degrees. All right, take it as it comes for now until we get to the real nitty gritty. So what I appreciated about the diva, although she said this thing about men being created by women, I took time for me to digest that part, but it makes sense. I'm okay with it. Let's move on, right? Let's move on. I always wondered why when both my parents uh have long deceased. And whereas I can promise you that my mother hung around me for I would say a solid, ooh, it was more than a year. I used to have a number, and now I'm not recalling the number, but I think she stayed with me for at the very least, I would say almost every night for a year. I would dream of my mother after she passed. My father, baby, you got to get the Inspector Clouseau to find that Negro. It's like my father left this place, and I ain't hardly ever seen him again. No more again. Why? Now I understand why. He done faded away into a female, ladies and gentlemen. That's what happened. He don't want to show me what happened after he died. He don't wants me to know. Son, I'm sorry. I can't show myself right now. Just keep the memory alive. And I do. I do. I do, daddy, mommy. I do. Ladies and gentlemen, it's like truth is it really, you know, it does have a sort of multi-faceted, many splendid thing going on. But it that's what I'm talking about. Little things like that, to me, it emphasized that this is the truth that I'm hearing about uh, men, and you know, you just see it when you look at the general population of how men are and how women are. I feel like, yeah, I think that's true what this woman, the diva, said. It's ringing true for me. And I feel I'm a truth seeker. As crazy as it is, I really, because I had to be a truth seeker because if I want to be free, you see what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen, you have to know why you're not free. You have to look at everything. And so then magically you become a truth seeker because then you start to realize with the truth, I can figure shit out. A lie will have me like again running all over the playing field. Who am I? What's my motivation? What do I do now? Tell me the United States what I do now. What's my move? What's my move? So yeah, my mother she's a big presence. My father, it's like now they stayed married through their whole, you know, marriage. So he did stick around, but in death, it's like homie walked out on the family. Like, where my daddy at though? Well, I see mommy. There she is. There's mama right there. How you doing, mom? All right. Love you, mom. Now, can you help me find where daddy go though? Where he at? He faded away into the mass femininity gaunt. Tell the truth and shame the truth. I mean, he must have mustered up the times that he did appear. I think he like mustered up all the powers of the feminine universe around him and said, "Please, my son been asking about me. Let me show him myself just this one time." And he showed up maybe once, three times the most in my since he died. And he died in 73. It's a handful of times I've dreamt of this man. I can't, like, okay, if I'm being generous, maybe five. Maybe being super generous, maybe five. My mother pops up anytime. And she was here in my psyche for a solid year, almost every night, dreaming about this woman. So it's just, oh, by now you're probably reading the screen while uh Pastor Haru is just preaching, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, we wanted ChatGPT as of June 6th, 2026, the hour of 12 p.m. We even tried to put a little timestamp on it because I do feel that ChatGPT may modify itself because of where she comes from, because it's a United States legal system becoming like something they use. I know they're going to want to modify, ChatGPT 2.0, ChatGPT 3.0, with, slowly but surely they get rid of the truth. But in these beginning stages, you have to capture the truth and then, yeah, okay, capture it, capture the time frame if you can, because it's still legitimate enough to use in a legal type of way. It really is, ladies and gentlemen. Now there was something where ChatGPT messed. It became a big news issue where I think it was on the news. I hope I'm not mixing and matching, but the story was that some attorney relied exclusively on ChatGPT, and ChatGPT apparently used a case that was not validated or something. It's one of, but see, again, they give you something, right, that they intend to use, whether it's faulty or not. See, that's what you got to go by later. If ChatGPT and AI is shit, then law firms would not be using it at all. The fact that they're willing to use this program, even with its faults, that means it's good enough for us, ladies and gentlemen. It really does. They are always going to want to try to keep the upper hand. But if they're using it too, how can you have an upper hand? I mean, why it works for you, but no one else? No, nah. It works enough for you to want to even take the chance to use it in the legal field when people are paying you to defend them, and you want to use something that says, "Oh, it's rights most of the time." Okay, so that must mean it's good enough. It's good enough most of the time. It's good enough. Okay. What I'm trying to say, ladies and gentlemen, is if we use it, we're not any less we're not any more at a disadvantage than the legal field itself, who also uses. You see, so it's not like they can reject it. Like say now the DNA kits, they can be rejected in court. ChatGPT can't be carte blanche rejected in court. It cannot, because the legal field is also using this type of AI. So what they might do is say, well, the ChatGPT that we gave to the public, that's always wrong. But the one that we use in the legal field is always right most of the time. So then you know they bullshit, ladies and gentlemen. Why would you make two different ones? Because you see what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen? You know? But anyway, I guess that's when they'll say, another thing, and we'll say this and then we'll move on. In the legal field, I don't know, from what I understand, my experience is even things like Windows, they don't quickly jump to the latest Windows. So it'll be interesting to see how ChatGPT, how will what I'm saying is the legal field, they can use outdated Windows, and there's no big problem. They don't just jump to the latest version of Windows like the minute it comes out, and then boom, next week we have it. That's not out. It can take years. I'm talking years. So it'll be interesting to see if that's the same uh, protocol when it comes to AI. Will they jump to the latest AI, or will they sort of linger, you know, and not be as quick to get the latest, version? People who work in the legal field, they know, they can vouch for this. If I can get someone who to comment in the comment section, what's the latest version of Windows that your law firm uses, the law firm you work for? This is not necessary, this is not like top secret information, ladies and gentlemen. It's not anything talking about clients or anything like that, right? So it's safe, But it would be interesting because from what I have experienced, uh, they're not quick to get the latest Windows as soon as they come out. It could take years, even. So let's us begin. We're trying to distinguish between original tribal systems of American Indians and the more modern foreign state system. When I say we didn't have states before King James created them, do we have any people who say different? Because you would be incorrect, you know? So let's read. The distinction, so ChatGPT now does a thing where it doesn't necessarily print your question depending on how you know, like for this, as you see, I added some color. So I printed it out with how did I didn't use print friendly. I used my own computer's system to print this out. And ChatGPT does not include the question. And I find that I kind of like that because my questions tend to be very long. And so I don't, and then because I'm just getting it in there, I don't necessarily have grammatical, everything is not grammatically correct, but ChatGPT understands what I'm saying. Say if I have a long run on question, ChatGPT can deal with that. That's another positive thing. So it just gave me the answer. And it said to me, to my question, basically asking for ChatGPT to let's lay out the differences between the state system and the tribal system. And please don't tell me how they are similar, because we heard that before. We heard the idea that, oh, the Iroquois had something like a republic. Well, we're not going to go with that. In other words, don't tell me how it was similar. Tell me how they were different, because we already heard the jive time rhetoric that, oh, the republic was modeled after Iroquois, a set of Indians that you said didn't have writing. You modeled your system after them. Give me a damn break. And they're one of the smallest confederacies. Why would you model a whole United States after a small confederacy? Because you're not trying to, if it were the case, that is, you're not trying to include all Indians. You want only what you call civilized. And we're gonna have to, over time, figure out that civilized Indians may not be Indians at all. They may be Moors who married into Indians and then started something completely different. You see what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen? They got some Indian blood, but they are not the originals. So they got a little drop of Indian blood, the NEGRO-PEAN, right? And then he ran and created something called an Iroquois Confederacy. You see what I'm saying? That is very possible, ladies and gentlemen. That is extremely, very feasible. That's what a NEGRO-PEAN would do. Now, a Caucasian and a Mongolian, they can't do that as effectively and still be seen as if they're American Indians, the original ones. But a Moor could do that and then say he was original. You know what I'm saying? Get a little bit of Algonquin blood, first contact blood, and then rework it to create an opposing confederacy of quote unquote Indians. You see? I believe that's exactly what happened, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not going to, bite my tongue. I believe that is exactly what happened because it makes no sense that they meet them 80 years later. You see what I'm saying? They're not first contact Indians. So it took time for them to develop a something they call an Iroquois Confederacy. And then they're saying it was made up of different tribes. What maybe it was different Europeans, like maybe it was the Dutch, the French, the English. Maybe that's what they also made some fake tribes that they say joined the Iroquois Confederacy because you're all European. That's why you joined. You're Moors. That's what I'm saying. They were all black. So they were Moors. Took some Algonquin words like Iroquois because that's all they had available. And it's interesting that Iroquois means snake people. And then we have a story of St. Patrick kicking out the snakes out of Europe. And then we get an Iroquois Confederacy. And Iroquois means snake. That's the original Algonquin definition of Iroquois, but they've come up with another one. Yeah, they had to. But isn't it interesting that they say they kicked out the snakes of Ireland and Scotland or whatever and England, and then we have a snake uh, confederacy, Iroquois confederacy. This is where the snakes ended up, masquerading as Indians. Because what are they doing? These are some of the nobility mixed in there. They say Cromwell got rid of King James. Uh, I think it was Dane Calloway that said, what's her name? Harriet Tubman was European nobility. So did they come here pretending to be slaves, ladies and gentlemen? Huh? Ah, oh, we want our freedom. Ugh. They came here masquerading as us and, then become us because they got a little drop of Indian Algonquin blood. And then they create our arch enemy they call Iroquois. Or they use the word that means snake. But okay. Um the distinction you are drawing is historical. So this is one of those rare occasions where ChatGPT really comes out and affirms what I'm asserting. So when I ask ChatGPT to make a distinction, they saying this is historical. It's not philosophical. The distinction between a tribal system and a state system is historical rather than philosophical. Many indigenous nations existed before the United States and before the Constitution. See, the Iroquois did not, let me see, they didn't, well, they existed before the United States, but the English didn't locate them they weren't, how do we put this? They weren't the first things found. It was Algonquin. So I would say that even the order in which the English find Indians, you could say that is uh, there's a uh, shall we say, English invasion. So the English invasion is not necessarily the United States. The English invasion is when they start sending people like Giovanni Verrazzano here, right? So the invasion also tells a story. You see what I'm saying? It doesn't have to be the United States appearing. It can be the first appearance of the invader. And what did he see? You see? So by the time the United States comes along, we can say that Iroquois were before the United States. But by the time Giovanni Verrazzano comes in as an invader, basically, there is no Iroquois Confederacy. You see what I'm saying? There was only Algonquin. So I'm just saying it's very similar to, you know, many indigenous nations existed before the United States, but not many indigenous nations existed before the invasion. You see what I'm saying? It was all Algonquin. Every invader that came here were running into Algonquins first. You see what I'm saying? Okay. So, yes, many indigenous nations existed before the United States, but not many indigenous nations existed before the first Europeans or French or Dutch arrived here. And before the constitutional republic was established. So let's read that again. Many indigenous nations existed before the United States and before the constitutional republic. You see, the republic was constitutional. Let's say that again, because this is a key thing in making our distinction. If you're talking about a republic, you're automatically talking about the Constitution. So what does that mean? That means that you're not talking prior to independence, 1776. There was no republic prior to independence, but we'll read further and see if that is reflected. I don't think it's in this document. I think it's in the next one we're going to look at. So let's say this again. A republic is a direct result of a constitution. Indians did not have constitutions. So therefore, Indians did not have a quote unquote republic. Ladies and gentlemen, please make note. Right now, we have Indians talking about recreating, reestablishing republic. Why are we reestablishing something we never established? Because you're a Moor. You are either a Moor or you are being advised by Moors that you had a republic before we got invaded by NEGRO-PEANs, which we did not. We did not have a republic before we were colonized. Let's say it again. American Indians did not have a republic before colonization. Before colonization. See, even Mumu the Fool could say it, right? And he said it fairly good. I think he did good, Mumu the Fool. You sounded it out kind of like how I did. Thank you. You're welcome, Mumu the Fool. So, ladies and gentlemen, are we clear that a republic comes with a constitution that Indians didn't have? The Constitution was a result of NEGRO-PEANs breaking away from their king. American Indians didn't break away from a king. They pretty much took him away from us. I mean, the last video we did, it sounded like they saying that they murdered Howard. I thought that's what I was hearing when I read that. We were reading an off-camera document talking about how Pocahontas was kidnapped and then got married and then was called Rebecca, the biblical character that helps her second son to steal the birthright of the first son. This is what they want Pocahontas to do. And how that works out is Pocahontas's firstborn son is called Colored. But her children with John Rolfe, no doubt, are being given a Pocahontas exception, meaning they can be called white. So they have Pocahontas, or they're using her to perform their Rebecca ritual. And the Rebecca ritual is a woman who helps her second son steal the birthright from her firstborn. That's what spell they cast upon Pocahontas by calling her Rebecca and converting her to do so. So she was converted to Christianity, and in her baptism, she comes about the water as Rebecca. This is done with an Algonquin female, not an Iroquois, not a Cherokee, not a Muskogee, not a Siouan, not a Tuscaroran, not any other Eastern Woodland Indian is this ritual done, where they actually name her after their Bible character. Why? Because Pocahontas represents first contact. Algonquins are first contact. We are all Algonquins. It's just that some of us were quote unquote civilized. And similar to the white and colored thing, civilized Indians were given a little more than uncivilized Indians in validity. But then they took that all away when they made the civilized tribes Mongolian. And I want American Indians to stop and think and note that whenever a Moor is present, soon after a Mongolian will pop up or a Caucasian will pop up in the place of those who identify as Moors. So the Moors got Algonquin Indians to agree to be quote unquote civilized, and they become Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, Seminole, right? Then he erases them again. Now he civilized them. This is the Iroquois as well. Cherokee is a fancy way of saying Iroquois. I don't know why, but that's how it works out because Cherokee speak Iroquois. So the more maneuvers you to become quote unquote civilized, once you do that, a whole group of Mongolians pop up and you have gone, he takes you underground to hell with him, to the hell workshop, because he's still working against uncivilized Indians. In other words, he has to now make uncivilized Indians think that they have no connection to the Americas because he's going to call them African. Now, the civilized Indians go underground. They get some little benefits and privileges. Maybe they become judges, lawyers in the system, politicians. They get a good, they get Jesse Jackson, rise up to some kind of weird authority. We don't know exactly what position he was, but he's someone that they listen to, right? Oh, he's a civil rights leader. Oh, oh, that's what that was. Oh, so you rise up to some little ranks when you become mortified, made Moorish. So, but it's very limited because the goal now, he got to grab some Indians to agree to become civilized. And the whole objective is to fool all the other Negroes on the land into thinking that, nope, it was only these Mongolians over here. The Negro ones, where'd they go? I don't know. They were copper colored, then they turned beige. Yeah. So that's what the Moor does. He's working, he grabs some of our people and gets them to side with him, but he has them working against their own people because now he's siding with the Moor. And then with that, he's going to get some idea that he has lineage in Mali. That's the go-to for some reason. Yeah, I think they're trying to connect that Abu Bakari story. The thing with that, though, is Abu Bakari came to allegedly, because that has not been validated, this mythical Abu Bakari, he did not come to North America. So that's going to present a problem. See, North American Indians who gravitate toward the Moorish program, you're going to have to give up a lot. Like this thing that you all do where you basically are saying the Caribbean Indians are not the real ones when they're the first ones known as Indians before you were. But you're going to say that, oh, the Caribbean Indians are not real. They NEGRO-PEANs. Well, if you're claiming Africa, how are you better than Caribbean Indians who don't claim Africa, except for the Jamaicans? So that's a whole other psyop, y'all. I told you we have an Iroquois Confederacy version in the Caribbean called Jamaicans. And that's a certain sect of Jamaicans, I do believe. I think it's the Rastans. I think those are ones that are claiming to be somehow linked to Ethiopia and Haile Selassie. So, in other words, they have to get a group of Indians to buy into some story about Africa. In this case, it's Jamaica. And when it comes to the South America and the Caribbean, it's Jamaica, unfortunately. Okay. So again, the North Americans who mixed with the Moors or overtaken by the Moors, they get a corrupted story and they can't account for it. Because normally the civilized tribe, I've heard them really rant against Caribbean Indians as if saying that they're not real Indians. But if you have a story about Mali from the Moors that made you over, please note that the only visit that Mali had in the Americas was to South America. Okay, so what does that mean? That means now you have to legitimize South America and the Caribbean, because if you have a connection to Mali, you could only get that through Abu Bakari, that fake ass story. But okay, let's go with it. Abu Bakari did not come to North America, so how did you North American Indians get a connection to Mali? It would have had to have been through South America and the Caribbean, because they're saying that Abu Bakari came to South America. So while you trying to argue against South America, some of you, not all of you, but some of you civilized Indians, you the only Indians in the Americas, and fuck the ones in the South America and the Caribbean. Why? You just as fucked as they are. You are just as fucked or worse than they are. So again, civilized tribes will proudly proclaim that they have ancestry in Mali, right? But Mali never came to North America. The story that they must be hinging you on is that Abu Bakari fairy tale that says that he came over here with 2,000 ships to South America. But North American Indians are allergic to South America, some of them. They think that they're the only Indians in the American, what so-called hemisphere. So that's how your leader divides us. He make you think you're special because you're from Mali. But you don't realize that he just made you a foreigner. You'd be better being from Caribbean than you would be being from Mali. But that goes over the civilized. See, they just made a bunch of Indians foolish. That's all these Moors did. They given them a story written with potholes that don't make no damn sense. And to top it off, then they somehow all these Negro civilized tribes become magically Mongolian. If that ain't the icing on the fucking cake, I don't know what is. If that don't show you what a Moor's agenda is, I don't know what will. He's changing you. He's going to make sure that by the time he finished with your ass, you have no choice but to claim Africa. He's putting Mongolians in your place, and you're accepting that. And then when you get accepted by the Muscogee Nation, you forget that you just accepted being slaves from Africa. That's what the Moor does to Americans, ladies and gentlemen. You want to know why we have problems with the Moors? I just gave you an example. They never leave you as you are. They make you over. We didn't even start reading from this document. We had our mandatory Moorish mashup. Mash it down, mash it, mash it, mash it up, mash it up, mash it up. Okay, let's start again. The distinction you are drawing is historical. Thank you, ChatGPT, rather than philosophical. Many indigenous nations existed before the United States and before the constitutional republic was established. In that framing, the emphasis is not on whether tribes needed a republic, but rather that they did not have the United States Republic as their governing system. Do you see that, ladies and gentlemen? Because the first conversation I was having with ChatGPT, it kept saying that Indians didn't need a republic. And I had to, straighten the bitch out. I said, look, ChatGPT, I'm not talking about whether they needed one or not. I'm talking about did they have one. Could you stop trying to insert your damn republic? then when you call her ChatGPT, she really then she goes. Some at times she will go right where it has to go, where you wanted it to go, because you're trying to make a point. So then she came back with gusto. She said, in that framing, the framing that I had to basically make her take because she kept, ChatGPT, it does a funny thing, but you got to read it yourself to see how it answers you. And then you got to say, could you reframe that? Because I'm not talking about whether Indians needed a republic. I'm talking about did they have one? Two different things, okay? In that framing, the emphasis is not on whether tribes needed a republic, but rather that they did not have the United States Republic as their governing system and were not part of the state populations that established the United States Republic. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's break this down because we really want to get this. It's very tricky. People have a hard time rejecting a republic because I don't know. I don't know why that is. I don't know why that is. It's because of the Moors. That's what it is. We know what it is. So, when you hear an American Indian talking about re-establishing a republic, I think what we have to understand is they're connecting it to this United States. Now, it would be different if they meant what it wouldn't really. I mean, it would be different if there was an Indian Republic, I should say. But I want to focus in on what they mean currently when they say reestablish a republic. They are talking about the United States Republic, okay? They're not talking about some republic that pre-existed the United States. We want to be extremely clear. A republic came with the United States. When you hear an American Indian saying that we are reestablishing the republic, they are not talking about something that pre-exists the United States for sure. Okay? Because then they would be advocating against this system. An American Indian should advocate against this system. Let's be very clear. What has this system done for you as an American Indian? Well, let's talk about one of the major things it's done. It made you African. Can you trust the government that would ever do something like that ever again? Well, that shouldn't even be a question. That should be an automatic no. It should be a no without the question. Because who would ask a rape victim how much they would like to engage with the rapist again? Who would ask that? It should be understood that if you were not invited to an American's homeland, you are an invader. And you have remained. Not only did you invade, you tried to say that I wasn't here. What more fuel do you need to know that you can't trust a government that sprung up under these circumstances? We need non-delusional Indians, for real, for real, for real. You might not know what you had before the United States got here, but gosh darn it, you should be reaching for it because you know it has to be better than this. It has to be. It doesn't get any worse than this, in fact. Why? Because this slowly brings you to certain genocide. We might not have reached their end game completely, but we should know by now what that end game is. Kill the Indian and keep the man was what they said way back when. Has that changed? No, it hasn't. But now they have technology that they can shoot up into your bloodstream that can make that happen. And it will kill the Indian and the man. Why? Because the Indian is waking up again. So now it's all out, get rid of them completely if we could. Let's read the last sentence again. In that framing, the emphasis is not on whether tribes needed a republic, because we don't, but rather that they did not have the United States Republic as their governing system and were not part of the state populations that established it. The republic, ladies and gentlemen, was established by states, not tribes. Let's say that again. The republic, ladies and gentlemen, the United States one that the Indians, the civilized Indians still want here, because they thinking that, oh, this government took over our republic. This government is the republic. It didn't take over shit. It took over your tribes, if you had one. That's a NEGRO-PEAN saying that the United States took over their republic. Indians didn't have a republic. Now, I will admit, the NEGRO-PEANs, once they broke away and established their republic, it was taken over by the United States. See, but that's NEGRO-PEANs. NEGRO-PEANs are from Europe. Indians are from America. So once again, they are melting themselves into the Indians' psyche, making the Indian think that this happened to them. No, your republic was taken over by the United States, but it wasn't an Indian's republic. After you broke away, once again, after you broke away and established your republic, you broke away from England, somehow agents in your government took over your republic with the federal government. That's what happened, ladies and gentlemen. When you hear somebody saying their republic was taken over, you're talking about a NEGRO-PEAN's republic. And because Indians are not trained to stay in their lane, they think because the Negro looks like them, that must have happened to me too. No, no, it didn't. You're incorrect. Profoundly incorrect. Know your place, know your lane, know your role, know your objective. A NEGRO-PEAN wants his republic back. An Indian wants their entire country back. That's the difference, ladies and gentlemen. So let's look at tribal systems versus state systems. Now, some people get mad. We don't want to be a tribe. We want to be like the civilized people. Well, you're called the civilized tribes. So you're still basically seen as tribal. But although they done made you worse than anything you could possibly be by being civilized. So if you go by your tribal system, you will know that it did not have a republic. So let's look. A tribal system exists because the people, families, clans, and nation exist. In a state system, which is a republic, a state system exists because a constitution creates a political structure. A constitution. Indians didn't have constitutions. So let's read it again. In a tribal system, it exists because the people, families, clans, And nation exists. Now, we don't like the word nation, but we're going to take it for now, just for now, because what we learned of European nations, we learned that we don't, that is a far cry from anything we would ever call a nation. Because you can't be a nation because you're too much in my cooling. If you were a nation, you stay home. You wouldn't be coming here trying to say that this is your nation. So Americans don't do nation like NEGRO-PEANs do nation. That's why we need a different word from nation. So in a tribal system, the tribe exists because the people, the families, the clans, and quote unquote nation exists. In a state republic system, the republic exists because a constitution creates a political structure, an English political structure. Let's be very clear. A NEGRO-PEAN political structure. Let's be very clear. In a tribal system, authority comes from the people, ancestors. Shout out to the ancestors. Shout out to the ancestors. Algonquin ancestors. You all speaking Algonquin. Authority comes from the people, ancestors, traditions, and customs of the nation. In a tribal system, authority comes from the people, ancestors, traditions, and customs of the nation. In a state republic system, authority comes from a constitution. So authority is coming from a piece of paper, whereas in a tribal system, it's coming from the men and women themselves. You see, one is fictitious and one is based on the man and the woman. Let's read it again. In a state republic system, authority comes from a constitution, statutes, and state institutions. Again, did Indians have states before Plymouth Rock state landed on us? No, we didn't have states. American Indians did not have states before Virginia was created. Don't let a Moor make your brain mush for his purposes. We did not create states, ladies and gentlemen. And therefore, we did not have republics. We did not have constitutions. Maybe they should have put oral history here in the first one because that's what would have been done, oral history. That's, the truth be told, that's how a system stays intact through oral history. Because once something is written down, it's open to manipulation by foreigners. They get to see how you roll and they mimic that shit. If it's not written down, but it is kept in your heart, even your Christian Bible talks about things being on your heart and not in paper. But then again, that's your colonizer reiterating stuff you already did and practiced. You see what I'm saying? That's why you had an oral tradition, because it was in your heart. The Bible comes along, gets you to get paper oriented and reading at like God literally took a freaking pen and wrote Bible. Yeah. Some people actually believe that. Yeah. They do. Yes, they do. But then even that Negro says, well, it's better when I write it on your heart. Also, we don't need this Mumu food writing stuff. No. Oh wow. I guess we were ahead of the game because that's what Indians were doing. Oral tradition. Once you write it down, your enemy can get it. Think of King James. Paul himself publishing a version of their scriptures. And once he did that, he was able to manipulate it for what he wanted it to say. You see, that's why an oral tradition is superior. It keeps you connected to your people. That's what it does. That's what it does. So, as we can already see, ladies and gentlemen, our systems are so different from England and NEGRO-PEAN that it would take some adjusting. But the ancestors, if they didn't think you could do it, they wouldn't bother. They'd let you stay asleep and say, well, it's too late for these people. They are thoroughly indoctrinated. Ain't nothing we could do now. Oh, well, let's just welcome them home when they get murdered and genocided. Oh, okay. But if they don't learn this go around, that means they're going to have to do this shit again when they come back to Earth, right? Unfortunately. Maybe they'll listen to us next time and not their colonizer. We can keep our fingers crossed, but it's going to be a hard knocks life for them coming back, not having ever been woken up when they were on Earth. They're going to wake up dumb again. Yeah. So if the ancestors are waking us up, that means it is very much in the realm of possibility for us to start taking their lead, scrapping any system that never worked for us if we are only honest with ourselves. It's been a fight ever since they've gotten here. Fight for this right, fight for that right, and the shit ain't even unalienable. It's temporary to begin with, and you fighting for some fucking temporary civil rights. And then you think that their anything rights that they have is actually our rights. That's right there is a problem. Our rights are birthright. Theirs are a constitution. They're still using their English system over here. Constitutions is part of the English and NEGRO-PEAN law. We didn't have constitutions, ladies and gentlemen, and we got along just fine. So their authority comes from a constitution, statutes, and state institutions. Our authority as tribal people, it comes from the people, ancestors, traditions, and customs of the nation. In a tribal system, membership comes through tribal belonging, kinship, adoption, or nationhood. So that's what never happened, ladies and gentlemen. The Moors didn't allow us to adopt them. They became our guardians. The system that they came with took guardianship over us. So it's like they adopted us instead of us adopting them. Let's read that again. Membership comes through tribal belonging, kinship, adoption, or nationhood. In a state system, where the republic lives, membership comes through citizenship. American Indians are not citizens. If this system went by our laws, there would be no citizens. Let's say that again. If this government was your friend and your republic, it would have never created citizenship, period, because they would have left that to you. You would have adopted these people into our tradition. That we never got to do that, ladies and gentlemen. We never got to do that. Now they say a tribe can do it, a civilized tribe. But remember, Congress has the power to dissolve civilized tribes. You're walking on thin ice. This system, it literally is making you domestic dependent, even to exist. Your existence depends on whether Congress wants you here or not. How do you come to my house and decide whether I get to exist in it or not? What kind of satanic bullshit is that? What kind of God are you worshiping? That Negro done lost his mind. That Negro done lost his goddamn mind. So a republic has citizens, ladies and gentlemen, but the Constitution, even in their system, the Constitution says we're not citizens. This is when the Moors make your mind into mush and you talking bullshit, don't even put the pieces together. You want to be in a republic, yet the Constitution says you're not even supposed to be a citizen. Make it make sense, somebody. Let's say it again. In order to have a republic, you have to be a citizen. Are Indian citizens? No, because they're not counted. They're not supposed to be. They're not taxed. Not supposed to be. But most of all, they're not even represented in Congress. How the hell you got a republic and ain't got no representation in the republic? Somebody, please. How the hell do you have a republic when you're not even supposed to be a citizen? Ladies and gentlemen, the cognitive dissonance among American Indians is Richter scale. Off the Richter scale. Government is tied to the nation itself. In a tribal system, government is try to keep point by point. Government is tied to the nation itself. Okay? In a state system or a republic, the government is tied to the state. Indians didn't have states, therefore you didn't have a republic. Indians didn't have states, and you did not have a republic. Indians didn't have states, therefore you did not have a republic. Therefore, you should not be trying to, quote unquote, reestablish the republic. You should be asking that NEGRO-PEAN why he can't do that in Europe where it started. That's what you really should be asking. When are you going to establish your existence on the land, American Indian? You're so busy establishing the foreigners that you don't want here that it don't even make no damn sense, though. Do you know how to make sense, American Indian? Do y'all know how to make sense anymore? I know the Christianity got you. I know it got a grip on your soul. But is there any part of your brain that's still free? Stop, can imagine freedom? Still, hopefully. Or maybe it's not American Indians at all, but it's the Moors masquerading again. So let's read again. In a tribal system, which is what Indians are said to be, tribal, ain't no shame in the game, y'all. At least we weren't getting fooled by a legal system. But what do you rather have? A tribal system that tells the truth or a state system that ain't done nothing but lie to you ever since you've been born? You know, some Indians will still choose a state system. I don't know why they do. I guess the acting in private really made the state system appealing. Getting a few more dollars makes it all green. But you never get home. The money sprinkling the scene, but you'll never get home. The money sprinkling the scene. You gotta want your land back. I'm talking about the green of the tree, not the fiat monies. In a tribal system, government is tied to the nation itself. It's the people. In a state republic system, government is tied to the state, which is a fiction. a corporate fiction. The state is not real, ladies and gentlemen. State is not real. It's a fictitious entity. And I know the state nationals need to believe that the state is real. But if Indians didn't create it, that's another strike against its reality. And from what we learned about states, I really don't, ladies and gentlemen, I don't want anything that colonizer brought here. Okay? If I don't fight for my home, I will be homeless because American Indians don't have anywhere else on this earth to exist. If you allow someone to push you off your land using his state and you think that's the greatest thing, you're not thinking it through. Again, the people that are populating the state have whole entire countries to go to, whereas American Indians have none other than the one that they're standing on. You should be beyond living. Just at the mere fact that you're being marginalized, pushed to the side for some state national folks who already have a home in Europe that they refuse to live in because they allowed somebody to misplace them. Now they get misplaced, and now you're going to get misplaced, American Indians. But again, unlike they, you don't have nowhere to run. There is nowhere else for you, American Indians. That's why your fight is a fight of your life. Literal. Where are you going to go when they decide that there's no such thing as American Indians? Where the hell are you going to go? Oh, you're going to become a NEGRO-PEAN and be a slave to some hidden monarchy or some hidden sultan? That's what you want? Because that's what you got, okay? That's exactly what you got right now. In a tribal system, leadership serves the people and the nation. In a state republic system, officials serve offices created by law. Serve offices. That's not the perfect way of saying it, because they're not serving people. You see? I want to give an example of how living in a state and a borough, whatever, I'm not being served. I think, yeah, I did make a video, but I never posted it about the bus ride that I have in my neighborhood that somebody in the local government, and I don't think it's the people because I see the people that stand at the bus stop and they don't look like they chose this. They don't look like they chose a lack of service. Somebody made a decision for them. And somebody would say, well, they have to go and talk to their local government. That ain't no. That's when you got to hear what a state national has to say about this system to know that if you're a United States system, if you're a United States citizen, you don't have any say, even if you go to your state assemblies. Now, the state nationals are recreating assemblies with local people, and they are separating themselves from the federal assemblies. A state national will say that your local assembly, the current one you have, if you didn't expatriate from a United States citizen to a state citizen, your local system is actually federal, and they don't listen to men and women or the immigrants that make up that community. They listen to dollars. Some people call lobbyists. That's who they listen to. Special interest groups. That's who they listen. That's who the feds listen to. United States citizens, well, really what the Fed should say is, look at your national debt that you owe us and tell me whether you should have a say or not, since you owe me. And since you owe me, you don't have a say. That's the basics of how the federal system. It made all its United States citizens debtors. So they can say, because you're a debtor, you don't have a say. I get to do what I want because you owe me, I own you. That's how commerce works. That's why they wanted a commercial system here so bad. The Moors, them people you think is your friends, them Negroes that look just like you. Yeah, this is the system they brought here. A commercial system, how it actually works, is if the debt that you owe, you have not paid, you don't get no say, because everything you have is owned by the government, including your body. You didn't pay your debt. And from the looks of it, it ain't going to get paid for generations to come. What the hell decisions do you think you're going to make in this piece? The government is going to make decisions to get, in other words, it's making decisions that's going to make money for them because they have not been paid this national debt that is owed, they think is owed to them. Well, the first thing we want to say as American Indians is like, we don't owe you shit. And we do mean shit. We don't owe you anything but shit, if you want to put it that way. We don't owe this government anything because they stole our land. They owe us everything freely for as long as they're here and even after they leave, the damage they have done. So that's the first thing. As a United States citizen, you owe the government. Okay? So what do we say? I want to give an example of how my local government does not serve me, but it must be serving somebody. And whoever that somebody is paying. It's probably a corporation of some sort. That's another thing. The corporations always have more, shall we say, capital to work with than the average man or woman. So you're in a lose-lose situation, right? Yeah, as a single man or woman, unless you start operating in private and become part of the fraud, you really don't have nothing. Okay? But there is something different between just being private and being a United States citizen. I think state nationals are more successful at being or operating in private than a United States citizen is. A United States citizen is, oh man, they are more taking part in the fraud, whereas a state citizen is calling out the fraud. The United States citizen who's acting in private is a part of the fraud. A state national, they don't belong here technically, but in terms of working with this system, they are actually trying to get rid of the fraud aspect of it. Whereas a Negro who did not expatriate to become a state national and is acting in private, they're acting in fraud. Straight up fraud. And I don't think they're going to get the full advantage of acting in private if they're a United States citizen. The idea is a United States citizen is a debtor by design, whereas a state national is not a debtor. But see, I don't really want to talk about their system, ladies and gentlemen. There I go again. I don't really want to talk about it, but I think I'm forced to, because people think that the magic way out is acting in private. That's the only reason why I'm even talking about this, ladies and gentlemen. It's not to impress you with something I think I know, okay? It's because so many people are taking these easy outs, acting in private, recreating a republic. That ain't it. None of those are it. It is not getting your birthright back. So the way we go on, ladies and gentlemen, I think this we might have to focus on this 3 page. Oh, it's only 3 pages, but I'm still on page 1. Okay. But I hope you can kind of get what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen. I was a state national, so that's why I know a little bit about it. And as of my public declaration, I'm not a state national. Okay. Now that's the thing. Sometimes you say, well, I still got the ID of the federal government, but that's an expired one. And I still got the ID of a state national. Yeah, I could have those IDs if I want. That don't mean that I'm still that. You know what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen? For a time, it kind of worried me. Like, well, should I not have this ID if I'm not that anymore? Well, if I have it, if I need it, I'll use it. But the thing is, it's not binding. It's not binding, ladies and gentlemen. It's just a way to avoid BS if I need to. Like, you see what I'm saying? It's just a way to, but I'm technically, this government, because of the notices that I sent them, they should know, and they do know, that I'm claiming to be American Indian who is not a citizen. And I was not part of any republic. I was here before the republic. You see, that's how you get a system to listen to you. You have to predate it, but you have to know what that means. You have to know what it means to be first contact. You can't be Iroquois and face this government in any kind of defiance. You see, you can't defy it. This is not really defiance. It's getting them to stop throwing their weight around where it's not supposed to be thrown around. Because I am not a subject of Europe, but furthermore, I'm not a United States citizen, which is a federal creation, and I'm not a state national because that's also a state. That's a state creation. I was here before those creations. That's what I'm telling the government. Oh no, they don't like to hear it, but I have to say it if I have any chance of avoiding genocide, political genocide, and just being raked with all these different taxes that they seem to love to impose on their citizens because of that national debt. They feel like these United States citizens, y'all are just debtors at this point. But again, they offer you to operate in private, but you're standing, if you have not expatriated, you're technically still just a debtor who can get in trouble. I think that was the thing why when I read well, I didn't read the whole that book that they want you to read a whole damn called redemption manual. In other words, I have to redeem myself. Please give me a damn break. I don't have to redeem. You have to leave. That's what has to happen. If you're a foreigner, you just have to. If you wasn't here, I wouldn't have to redeem shit. And I don't have to redeem anything. But anyway, there was a limit with what people that published the redemption manual, they could write it in a book. But the 1-800 number that they give you to call them, they were acting like they couldn't tell you shit. Like, you got to figure that out yourself. And I think that's because if you're a United States citizen, you're still being treated like you can't be told the high secrets of how to operate private. So they wanted you to mess up. That's the only thing I could conclude I could come to. If you're not telling me how to do this discharging of debts, you want me to figure out myself. That means you want me to mess up and get intimidated by the feds because I'm not a state citizen. I'm still a United States citizen. So the fraud is that the person acting in private is taking, well, what they feel is they're taking ownership of their straw man. But the straw man is fraud. So you taking ownership of your straw man, authenticating your birth certificate. You shouldn't want to authenticate fraud. If it's not authenticated, that means it's fraud, right? If you have to authenticate something, that means the government basically has you partaking in the fraud. Because we thought, didn't everybody think the birth certificate was authentic already? Why does it need authentication? Because there's some kind of fraud going on. But once you validate the fraud, you can't speak against it, really. You'd be out of line. So, no, we don't authenticate birth. American Indians shouldn't even have birth certificates. If I'm not counted in your census, why do you have a birth certificate? In other words, you're not even supposed to know how my numbers on this land. So why would I need a birth certificate so you can count me in some way, shape, or form? You should not be counting me, period. But again, ladies and gentlemen, you say to yourself, well, doesn't that mean the Constitution is good because it says we're not counted, right? And so all we got to do is go back to that. No, ladies and gentlemen, it's not that simple. What you have to understand is it was meant for things to go exactly the way they went. And that's the problem. A solid system wouldn't be able to go off the rails like this one did. This one went way off the rails, ladies and gentlemen. What that tells me is that it was a plan from the beginning. It was, and what it also tells me that people really do not, and hear me well. People simply do not understand the very government that they're in because they would have stopped this before it got this far. So what does that mean? It means you did not create the system. That's why you don't know how it works. And an Indian will get on a platform with a Moor, and that Moor will be spitting out some bullshit and sound like you know everything. Yet that Negro will never tell you that you were never supposed to be taxed, that you're not a citizen. But if he does say that to you, he's going to immediately say, well, you're part of the Moorish nation. That's why you're not a citizen. So he's still lying to you. American Indians are not part of anything Moorish. Moors originate in North Africa. Last time I checked, this is not North Africa. So the most he can do is train you to become him. Being self-identified means you're going to pick up your responsibility and you're going to do the work because it's not that hard, ladies and gentlemen. Why is it not hard at all? Because American Indians have the power to do so. This is your land. Whatever you say is law. Now, I would advise you to please try to make it just because we've already been through injustice. We don't want to mimic what this system is doing to anybody. I'm sorry. This system requires slaves, okay? In case you haven't noticed. American Indians, we didn't require slavery, okay? We were hardworking people. You hear me? We had a lot to be grateful for. But with that a lot came responsibility of cultivating what our ancestors left us. This bountiful land that some refer to as the land of milk and honey. Yeah, well, it's not easy, you know. But we had our ancestors' favor, and we really don't have that now. What they're doing right now with us, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say this is like we're at the point where they have to whip out a like defibrillator, okay? It's like they don't honor us, but we can't just have them be mercilessly genocided like this, else we wouldn't be worthy of our title as ancestors. No, they don't honor us anymore. They have completely gone astray. They're being led to a satanic situation. And there's some precious babies that the ancestors would like, I think, to have the opportunity to live in a just situation. So I guess it's that as well, that the ancestors come back at a certain time. But it really is, I think the timing is because it's unnecessary. They are, again, we're in a time where they have technology that they can just shoot up into your veins now and call you a transhuman, like a half android. You got nanoparticles in your body. So you're no longer, according to how they look at things, how the Moorish NEGRO-PEANs look at things, they can say to their demonic deity, see, they're not men and women anymore. Can't you just do it as you will with them now? Can't you just offer them? We can just offer them to you on a sacrificial table for our sins. Can't we do that? And they deity. Do they still have blood? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'll take them. Oh yeah, we're being offered as a sacrifice to the Moorish deities. Seriously, if you really look at the situation we're in, they're erasing us as a people. So that is an offering, a whole culture of people. And then because their deity requires literal blood, that's where we come in, American Indians. The Moors ain't trying to kill themselves. They no, trust and believe. Trust and believe. Them Negroes are far too hungry and thirsty for the creature comforts. You see, they fancy themselves because of architecture. But beautiful buildings does not mean beautiful souls. You see, so no, you got to work. You have a whole temple that is filthy with blood on your hands that you sacrifice to your deities. That's it. This is the fact of the fucking matter. It's all about blood. This Epstein file should show us that's what they have these people practicing. Drinking blood. So now I wanted to say that it's an offense to the deity to drink blood. But I think I get that from the way Hebrew Israelites and Islam's deal with blood. It's like they have halal, they have kosher, right? So what that indicates is they are not really allowed to drink the blood. But I think what might happen is when you're higher up, like you're a high, I don't know, you know, I think you may be allowed to drink some of your master's blood, his blood offerings. I think that's when you're high up, because that's what these people are doing with the adrenal chrome. I mean, something is going on. I mean, unless it's just the heathens that's still doing that. Like, okay, this is what it might be. What it might be as the converts. That's what it might be. The converts are engaging in the blood drinking while the bloodline folks are refraining. And that might be, I don't know, but I do know it's definitely it's a blood related cult. And blood has to be shed. Somebody drinks it. Some don't, some do. I don't know. But I know that somebody's getting that blood, okay? Because it has to be shed. Okay. It has in a blood cult. That's how it's not about love. It's not about a loving deity. It's about how much blood are you willing to shed to win my quote unquote love or gifts, whatever, or, you know, help you take other people's land and stuff. You see? So yeah. Yeah, I just decided, ladies and gentlemen, I need deities that I know have my back, whether I feed them blood, but they don't want blood. You see what I'm saying? But they would have my back just because they actually do love me, or they do see some semblance of something righteous. Yeah, that's nothing wrong with that. You know, we're not perfect, but we can have our leanings toward what is right, as opposed to really trying to do intentional harm or intentional wrong. You know, um, and any grace would be natural grace, not grace like quid pro quo, like you give me this and then I give you grace. No. When my parents or any parents that love their children love them, they don't require blood. It's just as simple as that, ladies and gentlemen. Shouldn't our deities be better than our parents? Wouldn't you say? If our parents loved us unconditionally, shouldn't the deity do so? Isn't that what he wanted? Or he or she or it? That's why they gave us parents like that? You know, one thing for sure, even if you don't agree with anything I just said, one thing for sure, you were not practicing Abrahamic religion before you were colonized. And you know what? That's all we need to say. That's all we need to say. If you are practicing something that your thief taught you, that alone should give you an indication that it's not going to work for you. It's not going to work for you. Tribal system. Leadership serves the people and the nation. I really prefer clans, family to nation. Although there's some definition of family that crazy and, you know. So in a tribal system, leadership serves the people. In a state republic system, officials serve offices created by law. You see? Now, a state national might disagree with that. They might say, well, we the people created the office. Yeah, but depending on what that office did, like what the US federal government did, it turned the tables on you and it changed the system. That's how the NEGRO-PEANS Republic got hijacked. It wasn't something Indians were involved in. It's something that happened in the NEGRO-PEAN system because the NEGRO-PEAN is using a English monarchy system, and that shit was bound to backfire on the Negro. You see what I'm saying? But he intended for it to backfire because this system is meant to profit monarchs in high places. That's what it's meant to do. Monarchs and priests. So the NEGRO-PEAN, the ones who know, they know that this system was supposed to go left. But that, it's the Indians that got fooled. But at the end of the day, what I'm saying is the NEGRO-PEAN is either complicit in this thing going left or he got blindsided because a system like this is never meant for anybody except those who identify as subjects. Point blank, period. You could redress it up. You could put lipstick on a pig. But if the system is designed by your uh, or majesties and your kings and your queens, it's going to serve them ultimately, no matter what you do, because it was created by them. Who created the state? King James did. And that's the problem for state nationals. They did not create the states that they are claiming. I said this before. That's the dilemma here, ladies. That's what's the problem. The state nationals fall short because they're fighting for a state that they never created. Okay? And as immigrants, they would not have had the right to create a state because they didn't get the permission or the agreement or the consent of the American Indians who own the land. So the whole state system is illegitimate because it wasn't created by American Indians. In a tribal system, laws may be oral, customary, traditional, and community-based. In a state republic system, laws are written and codified. We talked about that earlier. Oral tradition versus written. In a tribal system, land belongs to the people collectively according to the people's tradition. In a state republic system, land ownership is defined through state law. Who created the state? King James did. Was he an American Indian? Fuck no. In a tribal system, identity exists before written constitution. Ooh, that's a good one. So in a tribal system, your identity exists before written constitution. In a state republic system, identity is often defined through constitutional and legal status. You are being made over. See? So who's the Constitution for? Free persons, not for American Indians. We are just pulled in because of the doctrine of discovery and then pretending that we are a separate nation, but then saying we're domestic dependent. So in one sentence, they begin saying that we're sovereign, but then at the end of that sentence, they'll say, but because they're domestic dependent sovereigns, they're not really sovereign. See, this is the kind of double talk of a colonizer can do, and this is why an American Indian could never trust the system brought here by a freaking colonizer. Although they're kicking and screaming to keep the system here. They think that all the things that Trump is doing is because for American Indians. You done lost your mind for real, for real. For real, for real, for real. Trump ain't doing anything for an American Indian because he's here. And that's what American Indians don't see. When your hero that's fighting for you is a foreigner and you think he got your best interest, trust me, he doesn't. He's fighting for himself to be here. Because if your interests were considered, he couldn't be here without you saying he should be here. But you never had a say. You never had a say. You're lying to yourself if you think you did. And you're making yourself a NEGRO-PEAN who thinks that he had a say, but found out that, oh, they stole my republic. They did? Well, maybe your republic should be where your land is, and it'll work out a little better. The people that came to take this land, they had no interest in sharing it with citizens, let alone American Indians. They want complete dominance. This is a monarchy, ladies and gentlemen. When I really stand back and look at how it's operating, it's just that you don't see the monarchy as much. That's all. And they appear to be like they have nothing to do with this. If they created it, they have everything in it. Who created the state? King James. Can we move on now? Can we move on from who is running this show? King James is the whole Negro? Okay. He also identifies as Jacobite, so he's like a Jew, but he's a Negro Jew where there's a significance. A Jew cannot take your identity like a Negro Jew can. Okay. Uh NEGRO-PEANs makes for themselves several doppelgangers so that he never gets the full brunt of what he did, what he established. As we said before, the first Jews would have been Negroes. They set the whole entire foundation and then placed Caucasian Jews in that, just like they do with the Mongolians and the civilized tribes. That's how they keep their cover. And then they blame it on the people that they put in place to be the face of the entity or the entities. That's how Amor operates. The thing with American Indians is he wants to be the one that takes their place, ultimately. At the end of the day, when this all is said and done, he's got the identity he wants for himself exclusively is that of the American Indian. That's why American Indians cannot exist. That's what he did it with the Algonquins, right? Those are the first people that this Negro ran into, Algonquins. So he erased them because he took their place. Now he only wants to talk about secondary Indians, Iroquois, Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Seminole, Creek. Them is the Indians that he talks about because he's drawing attention away from the fact that he replaced the Algonquins. He cannot talk about Algonquins because the world will remember who the first Indians were. He's trying to erase that because he's standing in those shoes. Then when he came along, now the fighting between alleged Iroquois and Algonquins happened. There was no such fight before colonizers showed up for 80 years. Okay? So, in a tribal system, identity exists before written constitutions. And that's a very significant thing. We had our identity with or without paper. In a state republic system, the identity is often defined through constitutional and legal status. Okay? So let's go to the next one. In a tribal system, a tribe can exist independently of any republic. Let's read that again. In a tribal system, a tribe can exist independently of any republic. That's why they put that clause, Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, because we existed independent of their republic. We were not counted in their republic. We were not represented in their republic. We were not taxed in their republic because we were not part of it. We can exist. We're the only people that can exist independently of a republic. Yet we have these Indians crying out for a damn republic that they don't never had and don't need. Only foreigners need a fucking republic. We can't get Indians to, they're so proud, right? In the lies that the more are selling them, that they just ignore shit like this. Right? You keep ignoring it. You're the only one that's gonna pay for your lack of understanding. You're the only one that's going to pay for that. because real Indians are going to have all the authority. That's the trajectory of this thing. All this fictitious entity stuff, they cannot overstep an American Indian standing in their right stand, which is not part of any damn republic. In a state republic system, a republic is a particular form of state government. State government. Who created the state? King James created the first state called Virginia. An American Indian did not call anything Virginia. In a state republic system, a republic is a particular form of state government. Do you understand that a republic comes with a state? Who understands that? Please get it. Do you understand as well that we did not have states before we were colonized? Therefore, we did not have a republic before we were colonized. If you're calling out for something that happened during colonization, it's because you insist upon being a slave. As Kanye said, slavery is indeed a choice. Got a chance to see a wonderful film this weekend that I helped become #1 in the box office, Scary Movie 6. Yes, there was a reference to Kanye West in Scary Movie 6. That movie, it had the audience howling. Some parts had the entire audience just howling, including myself. I thoroughly enjoyed that film. Thank you, Wayans brothers, Sean and Marlon, both now. So a tribe can exist independently of any republic. But when American Indians insist on a republic, they're insisting on something that colonizer brought here. They are in error. Straight up error. So a republic is a particular form of state government. There was no republic before the invention of states by NEGRO-PEAN nobility such as King James. It is a Moor that is coming for you. King James was a Moor. King James would have been known as a Moor. Why? Because he practiced an Abrahamic religion. Moors are those who practice monotheistic Abrahamic religions. King James was a Moor. He is the one that created this entire system. But what happened was his subjects thought that they could, I don't know, sort of redesign his system. But what we find, and we saw this in one of our videos, is all they did was bring the English system here. They replaced Parliament with Congress. But they have the exact same design that they had in England. It's the exact same thing, except citizens, the subjects are now called citizens. So they think that, see, they misunderstand the concept of creation rights. State nationals, they misunderstand, they're not comprehending what it means to be a creator. So what does that mean? They did not create the states, as we said earlier. State nationals think that they can hijack a system that they did not create, but they can't. Because it's already written somewhere in a monarch's secret file cabinet who created what these citizens are standing. It wasn't them. They would have to go home and create whatever they want due to their birthright on that land. Then they can have creation rights. In America, it's not even possible. It's not even possible for them to create anything here. American Indians, yes. And I advise that you do not create a fucking republic. Why? Because that is something that will show you're a colonized people. You're just continuing in England's efforts to erase you. You're helping them. What we're talking about, ladies and gentlemen, is a system where we are, I'm going to go ahead and say it, we're going to be nature based, you know, uh, meaning it's going to go back to very basic medicines, foods. Everything we have here today is a result of capitalism. Capitalism has no regard for preserving anything. It'll preserve something it created, but in terms of how it treats nature, the cruelty to animals, oh gosh, I remember seeing something that was just horrific, man. The way these bastards treat animals because they use them for sacrifice to their demonic fucking deities. They don't give a shit about these animals. These poor animals scream, tortured. For what? Because that's what the deity requires, y'all. And then the followers of the deity, they begin to get off on torture. I'll never forget seeing, they literally ripped the testicles off a pig. I saw that somewhere. And I thought to myself, being a male alone, it was a male who did this. To do that to another creature that has basically the same anatomy as you, to do that, it should happen to you. You should get your testicles ripped off and see how that fucking feels. And that's the karma that these folks are creating. Now, I'm not saying I haven't done cruel things as an ignorant child, but as an adult, somewhere you have to realize it was not me being the best example of what they call humanity. Now, when you see an insect and it scares you half to death and you swat it real quick, that's not exactly the same. I don't think it's the same. I truly don't. I'm going to tell you right now, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, I know it sounds like I'm justifying what I'm about to say, but I don't know if anybody has ever had an insect uh bite their privates like I have. Yeah, yeah, we're going there. So what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen, I've seen firsthand what a spider bite can do to male genitalia. Okay, yeah, it's a little gross. Um, it freaked me the hell out, and I knew in my heart of hearts that it had to be a spider that did that, and I don't know what it did. It had to be some form of a bite, but it's right on the shaft, okay, and it left a gaping hole that I wasn't sure would even heal, but it was like somebody took a little something that gouges things out. Like say you have say like an ice cream scooper gouges out the ice cream or something. That's what it looked like. So like an insect did the scab. Once I took the scab off, because a scab formed, and I had to when it I had to take it off because it's the weirdest scab I've ever seen. I don't even know how to describe it. Wasn't dark color. It seemed to be a red and white sort of design. I don't know what to call it. Very kind of mucusy. It's like it didn't get completely hard, but that was the best it could do for the area that it was in. I don't know. But when I took the scab off, it wasn't just a superficial scab. It literally like repotting a plant and you pull the plant out and there's this whole the whole thing comes out like a whole the dirt the roots pull up the hole in like the shape of the pot. That's what this thing when I pulled the scab off, that's what it was like. It left a like a pothole. And I freaked all the way out. And all I could do was think to do was just hope that it closed up, and eventually it did. It took time though, because it was a bit. It was about I would say almost an eighth of an inch circumference of a gaping pothole. Like when you replant a plant and the whole dirt comes out, no dirt left. It comes out in the shape of the pot when you pull the plant up. That's what the scab was. It went about maybe the same 1/8 inch deep. Yeah, it seemed. I've never seen anything like that before. And again, I think it's because of the location of this. That part of your body is more, I don't know, delicate than say your arm or your leg or whatever. So I say all that to say I don't play with spiders. When I see a spider, yes, I'm going to, because I'm not reliving that. That's just my knee jerk. That's self-preservation. It's self-defense. I don't mean to be cruel, but I will kill a spider. Yes, I will, because I know. So I just knew it was a spider bite. I knew it was, and I can't explain how, because that's the only insect I really see around the house is spiders. And it happened while I obviously it happened while I was sleeping. And so I say all that to say I talking about being cruel to animals, and I have killed spiders, but it's not a torture thing. Like what I mean, it's a quick bam. They probably don't even feel it, you know. But what I've seen done to animals where they're screaming and oh God, when he pulled that pig's genitalia off, he was still alive. You could have did that when he was dead. They just I don't. Oh gosh, I can't. Ugh. Oh boy. Anyway, um, a tribe can exist independently of any republic. A republic is a particular form of state government. It's part of a state. Next. A tribe can continue even if governments rise and fall around. Now, I want to say corporations are doing this as well, but it's a fictitious thing. A corporation is something that gets away with shit and not really held accountable, and it just continues on and on. So that's a little different. But a republic depends upon its constitutional framework. So what we're trying to establish here, ladies and gentlemen, a republic is part and parcel to colonizers' legal system, not American Indians. So an American Indian crying out to recreate a public, that's the Moorish side of you speaking. You need to tap into the American Indian side and kick that other Negro to the curb. He's going to keep you divided. You can't be a house divided like that. You can't, because you don't know what you're supposed to reclaim. All a Moor can do is reclaim a republic because he has no other ties to this land. A republic came with the states. Indians did not create states. Okay? An Indian can be here without, and that's a privilege you should want. It's not one you should give up because, again, it shows that you are the original to the land. What is the point of you getting on a platform crying out about how much an American Indian you are, while claiming and craving a colonizer system? What sense does that make? The privilege of being an American Indian is that you don't need any of this foreign shit. And what it does around the world is enough to make you not want it, period. What it does to other quote unquote nations, what it does to uh, third world countries, what it does to you. Why the hell would you want this shit here? We are peaceful American Indians. We just want our position back. That's what we want. And that's nothing that the United States can deny us. It can't deny us going back to our origin. It cannot do that. It cannot do that, ladies and gentlemen. Just because it doesn't want to go back to its origin, it doesn't mean it stops us from going back to ours. Okay? It shouldn't have did what it did. It should never have done what it did. It was wrong. It was completely wrong. To come to a people's land and condemn them before you even got there, you're never going to respect them. And Indians who think that they're going to get respect out of that, you're delusional. You're delusional. And if allowed to, you would cost every other Indian their right to their birthright. You would be the cause, the cause of them losing it because of your ignorance, crying out for a republic. Republic never cried out for you. It didn't want you. It didn't want you. It wanted NEGRO-PEANS because that's who it needed it. The NEGRO-PEANS needed a republic because they was trying to escape subjugation under a king. Not you, American Indian. Get your character profile. Find it. Find it. Talk to the ancestors. But then again, if your ancestors basically NEGRO-PEAN, that's the problem. You're not American. That's the problem. If you cannot find your way to your original, what would have been the original for an American Indian? What would be the American Indian's origin? If you can't find your way to that and you stop at a republic, you're not going back far enough. You're making yourself exist only when colonizer existed. We're still on page 1. My goodness. So a tribal system, community obligations are central. In a state republic system, legal rights and duties are central. Legal rights. We have birthrights. In a tribal system, kinship is primary. In a tribal system, kinship is a primary organizing principle. In a state republic system, citizenship is a primary organizing principle. American Indians were never supposed to be citizens. Therefore, they cannot be part of a republic. Kinship is a primary organizing principle, not citizenship. That's what we could call our thing could be called a kinship. Do you have a kinship with American Indians? Okay. Then you can be here. If you don't, bye-bye. In a tribal system, now we get to page 2 finally. In a tribal system, tribal membership is the political foundation. In a state republic system, state citizenship is the political foundation. Now, it's very interesting that it said state citizenship, because state citizenship is not United States citizenship. Two different things. State citizenship depends on what state you're in. Federal citizenship is the District of Columbia. You're a District of Columbia citizen. So you're a United Statian. Okay. Even though the United States is not a state, the corporation is a district. So you're a United Districtian. Okay. In a tribal system, the nation exists first, government serves the nation. I would like to trade nation for people. In a tribal system, the people exist first, and the government serves the people. In a state republic system, I keep saying citizen. In a state republic system, the government structure defines the political system. So you're having a centralized, fictitious entity doing all the work that the people should be doing. In a tribal system, no republic exists within a tribal system. Okay? Yeah, I forgot. Did I capitalize that? Can't remember. I guess I did because it was profound. In a tribal system, no republic exists within a tribal system. Now that's what ChatGPT said. I just made it all caps just for emphasis. In a state republic system, a republic is a form of state government. You see, what we're finding is that time after time in this list, the republic is part of a state. Indians were not part of states. Indians were not part of states. They were outside of states. And they were supposed to be outside of the federal government. But the federal government grabbed us up due to the doctrine of discovery. Indians were not part of the states. NEGRO-PEANs were because they came from Europe. They had to be. The Moor, as fancy talking as he is, he knows that without a republic, his ass do not belong here. And if he is here, he's under the auspices or the authority of the American Indian. That's the difference between a Moor and an American Indian. The difference is here in the Americas, the Moors have no power that an American Indian did not give him. Should we say that again? Since people don't know the difference between an American Indian and a Moor, in America, a Moor is not the authority. The American Indians. And who dictates to who how to go and where to get there? Or where to go and how to get there? An American Indian calls the shots over a Moor. But you see, this your Moorish quote unquote brother, he never intended to submit to you. He intended for you to submit to him and his sultan. You see? Do you see? The Moor came here acting like the boss. That's why he can't stand your American Indian ass. You're the boss, the real boss in the Americas. He's the boss in Asia, Europe, and all of Africa, really, because he done dominated Africa through North Africa, basically. And I think that's why Africa looks the way it looks. I think the more it just, I don't know. It's just that, um, how could the Moor want to come to America and be a boss when he has so much work to do in the parts of Africa that are outside of North Africa? Your work is not finished, dude. Africa needs you bad. But you see, in the Sudan, they're fighting against Islam domination. So, what side do you think the Moor is on in the Sudan, ladies and gentlemen? Do you think the Moors are going to fight with the people who don't want Islamic form of government in the Sudan? Or do you think the Moor is going to fight for Islam to dominate the Sudan? Well, it could go a couple of ways. You see, because the Moor, he's not limited to Islam. He can show up and he is part of Christianity and Hebrew Israelitism. We try to avoid the J word. But because it's not really them, it's the Negro Jews. They are the American Indians' biggest problem. Why? Because you can spot a Caucasian Jew a mile away, but the Negro Jew is doing a tap dance right in front of you and lying to your face. To your face. He wants you to think that you're equal, but you're not, because as an American Indian, again, you call the shots in the Americas if you ever pick up your true identity. But if you're compromised, mortified, you're going to keep fighting the battle of the Moor. And the Moor wants a republic here. So his ass can be like he's a boss too. But again, the Moor doesn't share. We talk about the fight is even in the blood. The more genuine Moors are going to claim O negative blood. O negative blood does not get along with O positive blood. We said this in the last video, but we're going to say it again because it has merit, ladies and gentlemen. It's showing you a physical representation that you'll never see when the Negro's in your face. Now, the blood, the blood knows. Blood knows the enmity. Now, here's the ironic thing, ladies and gentlemen. As we said before, American O type O positive, it does not, it has no enmity with the Moor, but the Moor has enmity with American Indian O positive blood. So he can come into your world, but you can't come into his world unless you change your identity. He's going to tolerate you for a short time or for as long as it takes till you basically validate him and his gods and his traditions. This thing, that when they got people thinking that eating pork is blah, 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 blah. That's his shit. That's not American Indian shit. That's his limitations. Who knows? Maybe his O negative blood fights with pig blood. I don't know. So then he makes that like that's for everybody. No, that's just for you, my Negro. Now, right now, I'm going back to being a vegetarian, ladies. As of the last maybe 2 to 3 weeks, I've avoided meat. At one point, I did have a little shrimp in the middle of this. Ultimately, I think I tend to really like seafood, so I don't know that I'll stay a vegetarian, but right now I am, for the most part, for the last 3 weeks now it's been, I have refrained from meat, although I had shrimp and a little bit of scallops and a little bit of it was all I found this rice and I just had to try it. It was seafood fried rice and it had scallops, shrimp, and what do you call it? The lobster. And I was like, I've never had that before. Wait, I have to try this. So I think I'm trying to do a sort of a detox. And then once I get a little more detox, I might introduce at least shrimp and scallops. I just love shrimp and scallops, y'all. I'm not Muslim and I'm not Hebrew Israelite. So I don't have those limitations and I don't have that belief. I don't know why they don't. We can't be sure why Muslims, what is really the real deal with this pork thing. But they will try to make it like that. In other words, they're promoting this as if they're more pure. And just by their historical actions, maybe the deity you're dealing with considers you pure. I hate to say it like that, Leisure. Like we have to look at the whole picture here, okay? And um, again, you have a system that's sort of cultish, and it has in its rhetoric something about them genetically engineering other races, which requires mixing species, according to not just Farrakhan, but also Yafa Bey. She has said this. So when I quote her, I'm just quoting her. She said that animals were used in their genetic. So what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen, how can you advocate all this purity when the things you do show that you have mixed and matched species? Um, yeah. So it's like that's part of your system. And your system, as far as I can see, it's not pro-American Indian by any long shot. We were considered heathen. All Abrahamic religions considered American Indians as heathens, and that's why they said they could take your land from you because you're nothing but heathens, and you don't deserve the very land that your ancestors gave you, that they crave more than they crave the land that their gods gave. They want the heathen land more than they want the sacred land. Make it make sense, ladies and gentlemen. That's why I can't validate anything that is said from that camp. And even what they say about pork, I just don't know about it, ladies and gentlemen. I just don't know about that. I look at the whole picture. You see, I don't look at your eating habits. That is a big statement, ladies and gentlemen. This thing where being so pious, but don't want to be in the land where your deities reside. You want to be in the infidels' land? Okay, so now what you're saying to me is that your deities are not providing things that you find desirable. You desire what the heathens have. And so there's something innately wrong with that. You should want to stay home at all, like American Indians do. Most American Indians have no desire to be anywhere else. Even through all the hell we've been through, home is home, right, American Indians? Ain't nothing gonna be like being at home, right? May the ancestors shine on the American Indians who have always loved home, no matter what hell they were going through. But yet, all the pious king's horses and the king's men fight to be in heathen land. Make it make sense, ladies. Make it make sense. They cherish the heathen land more than their own land where their God reside. Make it make sense. You dedicated to your deity. He doesn't live here. He does not live here. And you know he doesn't. But you want to be here. Why is it that heathens have better land than you? I mean, I'm going by the way you act. You act as if our land is better than you. That's why I say it. I'm not saying it is, but I'm looking at your actions, not what you say about pork and shit. Why isn't your God providing you land where you come from? Why don't you want to go back home? It's their sultans, it's their monarchs that want them here. And they're doing the bidding of their sultans and their monarchs. This is like their religious duty is to fuck around in other people's homes as a means to what, convert them. Yeah, we got converted. And let me ask you, what changed for us after this conversion? Not a damn thing. Not a damn thing. We're still being dominated. All you didn't bring us anything. I'm talking about Islam and Hebrew Israelites and Christian. You didn't bring me as an American Indian anything. I'm still dominated. I still don't own my land like I should. And my tribe is like as if they did not exist. My group of Indians, Algonquins. You took one of our beloved daughters as your own. You renamed her Rebecca. What do I get out of this? Even after converting to the bullshit, it seems like you get more than I. You get my land. You get my land. And what do I get from your deity? A farewell to heaven or hell that you say doesn't exist? In a tribal system, no republic exists within a tribal system. In a state republic system, a republic is a form of state government. Indians didn't create states. Historically, indigenous nations did not have the United States Republic governing them before the republic was created. That's in a tribal. In a state system, the republic was created by states and their represented populations. Indians did not create the states. Indians did not create states in North America or anywhere. So when you see a state pop up anywhere on earth, know that it is something English, it is something NEGRO-PEAN, it is something medieval, it is something Roman. Anywhere you see a state, and part of that state is a republic. Let's read it again. Historically, indigenous nations, we prefer American Indians because we're not talking about all indigenous people around the world. We're talking about America. That's where the doctrine of discovery got really popping over here, the land of heathen. Historically, American Indians did not have the United States Republic governing them before the Republic was created. And whatever we had was not called a republic before colonization, just to make note. The Republic was created by states. Say that again. The Republic was created by states. Let's say that again. The Republic was created by states. More time for the mind. The Republic was created by states. Republic was created by states and their represented populations. Indians, remember, Indians are not represented. Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3. Indians not taxed, not enumerated, and not represented in Congress. Whereas the Republic was created by states and their represented populations. Indians are not represented in states. Indians are not represented in Congress. So why the hell do they want to be part of a republic? Because they're acting in their Moorish capacity. They have no interest in acting in their Indian capacity. They like to talk about it. Yappy, yappy, yap, yap, yap. All talk and not a single action to recreate your standing on this land. Not a single action. Except, again, I'm the American Indian. I'm the American Indian. And you want a republic what? Why? Because that's all you know? Yeah. Well, you need to know more. Simplified teaching statement. I had to ask ChatGPT to give me a teachable moment. Can you break it down as if we got to break this down to the children, ChatGPT? So this is what it is. Let's see. Tribal system. We are a people. In a state republic system, we are citizens. And notice their constitution starts out, we the people, right? So they already work in some shenanigans in their own constitution because they are people after they married into Algonquins, right? And now they're talking to the citizens, but they're the people. They done took our place. That's why they dominating all of us because they took our place. They got that one drop of colored Indian blood, and they made a white status out of it. So in a tribal system, we see the Constitution should say we the citizens, but it says we the people. So I'm kind of liking this correlation that ChatGPT did here. We are a people, okay? In a republic, we are citizens. American Indians were not supposed to be citizens. So you can't be part of a republic. Do you get it now? So, simplified teaching statement. We belong to a people. I like to say people instead of nation. In a republic, we belong to the state. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a quick break, and I shall return. We're back, and let's share our screen again. Thank you. Okay, so we asked ChatGPT to simplify this teaching and try to make it as simple as possible. So a tribal system, we are a people. In a republic, we are citizens. It is not, you can't be an Indian and a citizen at the same time, ladies and gentlemen, is the idea. You have to choose your birthright. If you're an American Indian, you will choose your birthright over anything that minimizes your authority on the land. There is unfortunately a unfortunate strategy here, ladies and gentlemen, and it's all about limiting your authority. Now, these people, again, they come from their homelands where they had plenty of authority, and now they're asserting it over you and saying that, oh, it's going to be a big fight for you. And I want to say, ladies and gentlemen, I had this thought about fight, and the ancestors whispered to me. And the ancestors said, you're boycotting power if you need to. Don't it doesn't have to be this big, oh, it's a big oh, it's a war. Mm-mm. If when we get serious, we're gonna have to do even what Mr. King did and use the power of boycott. If you are refusing to acknowledge that we are the authority of the land, we boycott your system. And however that looks and wherever the boycotts need to take place. Yep. That's how it would be. If it has to be. We advocate peace, a peaceful transition of our property, which we don't call it property. but they call it that. We call it our ancestral land. We have to have that back, or else we're as good as dead, an endangered species with the way this thing is going. It has yet to admit that the American Indians are Negroes. It has yet to do that. And it's not going to do that, especially when we have a bunch of us advocating for a republic. Why should they? It's in their best interest to have us believe we're NEGRO-PEANs because only NEGRO-PEANs would fight for a republic. American Indians would be like, American Indians would be like, again, can't you create your republic in your homeland? Because we didn't do those over here. And from the looks of history, they don't do us either any good, that is. Republics don't do us any good. I don't know what American Indians think a republic is going to give them. If you're asking to be secondary, well, yeah, the republic can make you as if you're a foreigner. That's what it can do, if that's what you want. But some American Indians are tired of being constant, not even second, but last. So you alleged American Indians who all you see in your future is a republic, you must want more of the same crap we already had. Some people don't want that shit no more. When their ancestors come along, you shouldn't want it at all, is what I'll say to that. So in a tribal system, we belong to a people. In a state republic system, we belong to a state that we did not create. In a tribal system, our nation existed before the United States. In a state system or republic, the republic began with the Constitution. Can we say that again? Where did the republic begin? With the Constitution. Okay, so when did the Constitution happen? 1787? Were there any American Indians in this land before 1787? Would you please stand up or raise your hand or something, American Indians? Give me a wolf call or something. Okay, so you were here before any republic. Would you say? Would you agree? Okay, so then why would you want a republic? Something that came with colonization, a colonization that is still not fessing up to what it did to you. So if you don't compel it to confess, it's going to continue to act like you don't exist. Or you exist as a slave from Africa who was married into the Mongolian version of the civilized tribes. See, that's what Negro 5 civilized tribe members are co-signing on, whether they know it or not. You're co-signing on the overall idea that you are slaves of the Mongolian civilized tribes, not the original ones, you see? So you're compromising your own history as well. Yeah. So in a tribal system, our authority comes from our people. In a state republic system, authority comes from the Constitution. I mean, I'll say it a million times if I need to. Look at the Constitution and tell me if Indians not taxed are represented in the Republic. Because the Constitution, the Republic began with the Constitution. So look at the Constitution, Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, and tell me if an Indian is represented in Congress, which represents the Republic, or was supposed to. It says Indians are not represented because they're not counted and they're not taxed, right? So that means you're not even paying for the service of a republic. You're not even paying for the services, the 19 enumerated functions. That's what the taxes basically are paying toward. enumerated functions. Um, so you're not even paying for the service, allegedly, of a republic form of government because you are outside. You were considered outside of the jurisdiction of the United States. The United States is the republic. American Indians were here before the republic. Oh, I must have thought this was interesting. Our nation existed before the republic and was not created by the republic. As a tribal people, our nation or nations, whatever, existed before the republic and was not created by the republic. Therefore, we should not be looking to restore a republic. In a state system, the republic was created through the constitutional state system. Indians didn't have constitutions. Indians didn't have states. So they could not have created a republic. Now, your NEGRO-PEAN, he did create the republic. Him and the Caucasians that he partnered with created the republic, like Benjamin Franklin and them, right? Andrew Jackson, them is your forefathers, if you are a NEGRO-PEAN. So it is they who created the republic, not American Indians. Powhatan never had a republic. The first contact, paramount chief, you would think the paramount chief, the paramount chief of our nation would have spoken about a republic, but he didn't. So where did the republic come from? Europe. Where did the republic come from? Europe. Where did the republic come from? Europe. One more time for the mind. Where does the republic come from? NEGRO-PEANs living in Europe. Historical distinction at the founding. Indians not taxed, free persons of the states. So Indians not taxed generally belong to indigenous nations. Free persons of the states belong to the political populations of the states. Indians are not free persons. You're looking at the distinction right there on the page. That's another lane changing thing going on. Indians thinking that they're free persons of color. Nope. Oh, that's what they wanted you to be so that you wouldn't exist and so that they can call the shots on your land. Yeah. It would be to their advantage for you to be a free person of color. But in the Constitution that you keep wanting a republic from that you're not reading, you know, that piece of paper that you insist upon having a republic, but you won't read the document that the republic came from? Yeah, that one says you're Indians not taxed, not free persons. It doesn't, the Constitution don't even mention free persons of color. So free persons of color are unconstitutional. Did we say that again? Free persons of color are unconstitutional because the Constitution only talks about free persons. It is civil rights or the civil right movement that created, that legislated free persons of color, which are called colored. So, historical distinction at the founding, beginning. So, if we start with the Constitution, that's where the Republic started. But the Constitution is also giving shall we say, reference to something that came before the states, and that was Indians not taxed. Indians not taxed generally belong to American Indian nations. Free persons of the states who paid taxes, who were represented in Congress, who were enumerated, all the things that Indians not taxed are not, they belong to the political populations of the states. Indians were all over this piece. We didn't have no states. We were just all over this land, spread out, free. And I guess they would have saw us as if we were like a virus. We were spread out all over this piece. Wasn't limited by no damn states. So Indians not taxed usually govern through tribal systems. Free persons govern through state systems like republics. That's the whole point of this document, is we're showing what belongs to a republic and what does not, for the Indians who are confused. Indians not taxed, not counted for congressional representation. Free persons are counted for congressional representation. Again, Indians are not counted because they're not represented in Congress. That's what they mean when they say congressional representation. You're not represented in Congress, but Congress, they took the role of being your guardian. So in other words, they can make the decisions without you being represented. That is a dictatorship that American Indians were hornswoggled into by the Moors. The Moors should have known all this, ladies and gentlemen. As the quote-unquote legal experts they portray themselves as, they would have known this. They did know this. The point is to keep you blind and stupid and ignorant of what it means to be an Indian not taxed. They're going to jump to being Indian tribes. And what they mean by that is civilized tribes. They're not even talking about all other tribes, but they're going to dominate them too. Why? Because they just got it like that. How did they get it like that? The doctrine of discovery gave it to them like that. So Indians not taxed are not counted for congressional representation. I feel like when you read that, Indians put their fingers in their ear and just say, but I still want a republic. Because if I can understand this shit, I know people out there understand it. They're just ignoring it. They're just ignoring it. Why? Because they're morally inclined. This shit is not that hard. Do you know, do Indians know what being represented in Congress even means? I know you do. So then why do people act like they don't understand this breakdown? You want a republic, but you don't want to go by the Constitution? You're out of order. You're out of order. What you should be insisting upon is creating your own system, because that's what the Constitution is actually saying you had, although then we'd have to come back and check the Constitution, because power is not shared unless it's in a colonial situation where a foreigner is sharing your regulating of your resources. Why? I don't need you to do that. You could go home and regulate your commerce there. But when you're on my land, you're regulating my resources, and that means I'm not getting any recoupments. I'm not getting any compensation for you regulating my commerce, as in the Commerce Clause, where you interpret regulating commerce with Indian tribes to mean you dominate all Indian tribes. Why did they get that version of the Commerce Clause? Where did they get that from? Well, they used the doctrine of discovery to make that claim, that they have plenary authority because they can regulate commerce with American Indians. That means to them that they can dominate every move Indian could possibly make on his land. That's how they misinterpret that. But that's why we don't want a system that can be misinterpreted. It has to go. We were not part of it. We're not part of the Constitution. They're just referring to us to tell their people to stay, leave us alone. That's basically what Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 amounts to. And then they're only talking about the civilized tribes when they're talking about regulating commerce of the tribes. Technically, they only have jurisdiction over civilized tribes because they remade the Chickasaw, Choctaw, Cherokee, Seminole, and Creek. They made them over, and now they're little creations of the federal government. So the federal government gets to dominate you and then act like ain't no other Indians on this piece. But they're going to still dominate those other Indians because they're going to say something about having plenary authority over all Indians, when technically all they ever talk about is the civilized tribes anyway. So it's like, you know who you really have authority over, but you're just going to expand that like you tend to do, expand things where expanding was not lawful or legal. You're going to do it anyway. Because what? The doctrine of discovery. So next. Oh, that's it. No, not considered part of the state's represented population. Indian tribes are not considered part of a state or a state's represented. I'm sorry, represented. Oh Lord, you get tired. Not considered part of a state's represented population. You're not part of those that who are represented. It's free persons who are represented, not Indians, not taxed. So free persons are considered part of a state's represented population. Free persons are considered part of a state's represented population. Indians not taxed, political identity derived from tribal nationhood. Free persons, political identity derived from state citizenship and residence. See, they added something else because the Constitution doesn't, I don't believe it talks about residents. Does not talk about residents. So they're making up things for both parties. Once they created that United States citizenship, they started calling all the shots. Yeah. So Indians not taxed. American nations existed before the Constitution was written. We said this before. We didn't have a republic before the Constitution was written. Free persons, the constitutional republic was created by the states and their represented populations. Indians were not represented in those populations. Indians were not represented in Congress. There's no way they were part of the republic. NEGRO-PEANs who look like you were part of the republic. That's where the confusion is coming. But then those NEGRO-PEANs were reduced, and we were lumped into that reduction as colored. And then you get the Negro Code. So the NEGRO-PEAN, they started out free persons, then they were called free persons of color, and then we were all lumped together as these colored folks. That's how they take over your birthright. You see, it looks like it's a bad thing that happened to the NEGRO-PEANs, but actually it's a good thing because now they can claim to be on par with American Indians as colored. So now it's all mixed up. Now we don't know what's a colored or what's an American Indian, what's a NEGRO-PEAN, because they're all mixed up. And that's exactly what the Moor intended. He wanted to be mixed in to us so that he can dissolve our existence. Once he became us by calling himself a free person of color, that made him colored. And then he took that designation from Algonquins and created a white status for his Caucasian counterpart. They came together. The NEGRO-PEAN and the Caucasian came together, but the NEGRO-PEAN was doing all the wheeling and dealing. If we go with the narrative that all whites were Slavs, they were slaves. So who was doing the wheeling and dealing? It was the NEGRO-PEAN who happened to be mixed in with the NEGRO-PEAN nobility. As we see with Harriet what is it? Was it Harriet Tubman? Um, I might have got the characters wrong because I know that Dan Calloway talked about some one of these characters being nobility, NEGRO-PEAN nobility. I believe it was Harriet Tubman, but I think he also said that she was a fictitious entity somehow, or somebody else signed for something. But I do recall that these folks were helping the Jacobites who were mixed in with the Negroes that came from Europe, like England, Ireland, Scotland. Uh, the nobility was coming here acting like they were subjects to the nobility. And then slowly they knew how to maneuver this system that they created in Europe. They knew how to maneuver it to so they can be like they as if they are us. Meanwhile, they're recreating us into civilized entities. In other words, you're no good. The only thing that's good about you is your land. So I'm going to need some of y'all to cooperate with me. So I'm going to call y'all civilized. And then the rest of y'all, I'm going to condemn y'all to hell and extinction. But these little civilized darlings over here, I just need them to be my birth canal. Little do they know. And then I'm going to erase their legacy too, because I'm going to have them saying they're from Mali. That's what the NEGRO-PEAN brought here. Not Caucasians, NEGRO-PEANs brought that bullshit here. For obvious reasons. Okay, so indigenous nations existed before the Constitution was written. That's Indians not taxed. Free persons, the constitutional republic was created by the states, not American Indians not taxed. Created by the states and their represented populations, which were free persons. Indians not taxed did not ratify the Constitution as states. Let's read that again. Indians not taxed did not ratify the Constitution as states because we were not in states. We were tribal, right? Free persons participated through the states that ratified the Constitution. American Indians don't have anything to do with the Constitution being ratified. Now, the civilized tribes, perhaps they might think they did, but no, they're not really, because they're not free persons. Indian tribes are still not free persons. They're just the Indians that submitted to being dominated by NEGRO-PEANs and Caucasians and Mongolians. That's why they let the Mongolians take their whole entire identity. You go to look at their website, we talk about this all the time. Look what the Cherokee look like today. Look what the Choctaw look like today. Look what the Chickasaw look like today. Look what the Creek look like today. Look what the Seminole look like today. Look what the Iroquois Confederacy look like today. Damn it. All Mongolian and Caucasian. Wherever a Moor goes, Caucasians or Mongolians or both pop up where the Moor used to be. Wherever the Moor used to be, he leaves Mongolians and Caucasians in his wake to cover up his Bigfoot ass tracks. That nigga running around pretending to be Bigfoot. You don't see him now. You thought you saw him. There you go again, wearing all this woolly shit, trying to be, disguise himself. The Bigfoot nigga. Hiding behind Mongolians and Caucasians. Bigfoot in the woods. Indians not taxed were generally regarded as separate political communities. People, Indians don't know what separate mean anymore. Apparently, they don't know what separate mean no more. I don't think they ever did. The way they going, these 501c3 Indians, these civilized Indians, Let's read that again. Indians not taxed were generally regarded as separate political communities. Does anybody know what separate mean? Separate? Separate from a republic? Not part of a republic? Free persons were members of the political communities that formed the Union. Remember, NEGRO-PEANs were part of the Union. When you saw that little picture with all them black faces, that wasn't you, American Indians. That was the NEGRO-PEAN formulating his government for himself and for white people, Caucasian people. It looked like you, American Indian, but it was your doppelganger. It was not you. Indians not taxed were not part of this government. Read the Constitution. Understand what it means. If you don't understand what it means, Google. Google, what does it mean to be Indian not taxed? What was they part of the Republic? And you're gonna get your answer if you can bear to look at the screen. If your eyes don't fall out because you're so insistent on being a NEGRO-PEAN lately. So Indians not taxed were generally regarded as separate political communities. And what happened with that is the United States used the Commerce Clause to pull us in, but as guardians, not as free persons who had a say at one time. They pulled us in as wards being chastised by their guardian. Get on in this republic before I kick your ass. Talk about you, the Indian not tax you. I'm gonna tax that ass. And you're not still not going to be represented, but I'm going to tax you anyway, and I'm going to count you in my census anyway. But you're going to say you colored, so I could look like I'm going by the Constitution. I can't say you Indian because that says Indians not taxed or not counted. So when I count your ass, you're going to say you colored. Or I'm going to make you fill out that form, and then I'm going to go back and fix it and say you colored, you black. I'm going to turn that I into a B. That's how the system works with American Indians. It just completely dominates us. And apparently some of us like it. I guess these are those S&M Negroes. They just... So Indians not taxed were generally regarded as separate political communities, not part of the Republic. Free persons were part of the Republic. NEGRO-PEANs were part of the Republic. The key distinction. Tribal system equals nation, people, clan, family, tradition, custom, ancestral authority. State system equals constitution, citizenship, legislature, courts, statutes. Republic. A republic is part of a state, ladies and gentlemen. We said this throughout this document. ChatGPT formulated this because it is a fact. Now, you do have to get her to focus, which I did with this document. We worked to this document. We worked to get there because ChatGPT, so, sometimes she'll say, well, Iroquois had something like that, but it wasn't. It wasn't the same, right? Because it predates the Constitution, right? So we can't say what the Iroquois had because they didn't have writing. Okay, so they didn't write it down, apparently. They had writing, but it was Algonquin, so that had to be stripped away from them so they could become civilized. As we said, imagine becoming civilized means giving up your writing. Everything in colonized world is upside down, backwards, and in opposition. Key distinction. Tribal systems equals nation, people, clan, family, tradition, custom, ancestral authority. A state system equals constitution, citizenship, legislature, courts, statutes, code, rules, and regulations, and a republic. And the historical distinction can be summarized this way. Indigenous nations existed before the United States was established. Many indigenous people classified as Indians not taxed were regarded as members of their own nations. We did not share a republic with the United States. Get over it. Snap out of it. Wake up. Indigenous people classified as Indians not taxed were regarded as members of their own nations rather than members of the state populations that formed the constitutional republic. Who formed the constitutional republic? State populations. Who populated the states? Free persons. Free from what? Domination from British nobility, French nobility, British nobility, Spanish nobility, whatever. Those are free persons. Indians were not dominated by those entities until the doctrine of discovery had them come over here uninvited. We do not want a republic because we did not invite one. Those of us who are conscious, talk about being conscious. Indigenous nations existed before the United States was established, but they were known as Algonquins. Now, after the explorers and the invaders come, they create a bunch of Indians that they met 80 years later because they took them that long to realize they gotta create some new Indians here to dominate because they taken the place of the Algonquins as whites. So they did set the stage by creating Iroquois before the United States existed because they needed something to latch onto that they could say existed before the United States came. So they're trying to say that somehow the Iroquois validated the colonizers. Like we had something with the Iroquois. Well, you should have had something with the Algonquins, but instead you just acted like they didn't exist because they are first contact. So whatever you have with the Iroquois is illegitimate. And we can't be sure what the Iroquois actually are because they come 80 years later after you've been here. So they can't validate you because we're not sure they even existed. When we say they didn't exist, what we really actually mean is they did not exist to colonize. So we cannot trust that colonizers telling the truth. You see what I'm saying? Colonizer will say whatever he needs to say, but we have to be on our P's and Q's to question everything he says, especially when he's trying to indicate that he has some kind of connection with American Indians who never invited him. The Iroquois Confederacy didn't invite these explorers. And if they did, they would have went straight to the part of the land that the Iroquois lived in if the Iroquois existed. So even the Iroquois can't say that they invited a relationship with British nobility. They did not. And we know for damn sure the Algonquins did not. That's why they kidnapped Pocahontas and then married her. She was already married. To show you the level of disrespect, again, these people were practicing Christianity, right? What Christian marries a woman who's already married and calls themselves doing good in the eyes of their God? It's because they didn't respect American Indians. Or they can act like they respected Iroquois, but that's why we got to question what was an Iroquois? Was it just NEGRO-PEANs who married and became Algonquin, but then decided they're going to call themselves Iroquois? Is that what Iroquois Confederacy is? Just NEGRO-PEANs who created a new identity for themselves, but pretending to be like their first contact Indians, or they're the primary Indians when the primary Indians did not invite them and the primary Indians resisted them? Powhatan was waging war against these motherfuckers. He was called a war chief at one point, Powhatan. And my nation said they didn't want to be part of that war. But because we were already infected with fucking NEGRO-PEANs. We already had NEGRO-PEANs living among us. But see, the NEGRO-PEAN won't admit to my people because he'd have to admit that he found us here. See, that's why even though we got along with the nigga, he can't validate us. because he'd have to admit that we were here before him and we have a standing that he'll never have. That Negro Moor will never have an American Indian standing. Only by those few Indians that somehow believe that Moors are on their side. They're out to genocide. Okay, if they marry you, if the Moors marry into you, it's only you, and they're going to have you genocide all the rest of your people. So you're still doing wrong by your own people. So let's start again. Indigenous nations existed before the United States was established. Many indigenous people classified as Indians not taxed were regarded as members of their own nations rather than members of the state populations that formed the constitutional republic. Therefore, the tribal system and the republic originated from different political foundations, one from pre-existing indigenous nations and the other from the states that created the United States Constitution. So the tribal system pre-existed the United States and the republic. That's what Indians need to get back to show that they were a first people on this land. If they keep insisting on being part of a republic, what they're saying is we did not exist before we had this republic. And they never did have the republic. It was the NEGRO-PEAN who had the republic. And then they married the NEGRO-PEAN, and the NEGRO-PEAN brainwashed the American Indian. And now the American Indian think he's a NEGRO-PEAN. Fighting for what a NEGRO-PEAN would fight for. Because a NEGRO-PEAN is trying to take your standing and get rid of you. So one is from pre-existing indigenous nations, and the other is from the states that created the United States Constitution. That wording keeps the focus on the historical separation of the two systems without suggesting that tribal nations required, originated from, or were originally governed by the United States Republic. And ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of the document. I think we're going to end the video here, although we did have other things to look at. I think I want this to be a standalone subject, although it was still going to be the same subject. We're going to look at a number of sources, a few that bring this point home, that we were not a republic. But we'll save that for next video. So until next time, thank you so much for watching. Be and stay. First contact, American Indian.